Day of Confinement, a game invented by the evil gods of the universe just to kill time. 20 years ago, this game crashed down onto Earth like a meteor, and it brought with it both catastrophic disaster and life-changing opportunity. Humans were randomly selected and forcibly dragged into this game, whether they wanted to play or not. The game itself is built around dungeons, each one with its own difficulty, its own twisted rules. But the one thing that never changes. Clear a dungeon, and you walk away with powerful cards that can completely rewrite your life. And the losers, they pay for it with their lives, trapped inside the game forever. Everyone who gets pulled in thinks they've got what it takes. Defeat the boss, snag some S-rank cards, become the last one standing. Classic protagonist delusion. But in the end, only one person made it out of this cruel game alive. He used to believe that if he just kept going, clearing stages, conquering dungeons, grinding through bosses, getting stronger, he could have everything he ever wanted. But standing at the very end of it all, he finally understood the truth. The ultimate destination of this game was godhood itself, and that was not the ending he actually wanted. So he turned it down. He walked away from becoming one of the evil gods. Then a massive red creature appeared before him, its body a grotesque, writhing mass of fleshy tendrils, multiple glowing eyes staring out from the darkness like something straight out of a cosmic horror manga. And then it spoke. It called him Earth's only clearer, the strongest player the confinement game had ever seen. It dangled the offer in front of him: join them and receive eternal life and endless lifespan, supreme divine power, dominion over everything in the universe. It reminded him that on this entire planet he alone, the sole survivor, had the qualification to ascend. The creature asked if he was truly willing to give up that qualification. He answered without hesitation, yes, he was sure. He had made the most rational decisions in every dungeon. He played the game perfectly and became its only true clearer, but the path he walked to get there had cost him far too much. His mother, his friends, the person he loved, every single one of them lost their lives inside this game. The red creature grew curious. It wanted to know, if not godhood, then what did he actually want? He answered quietly. He wanted a peaceful, boring daily life. A world where everyone he cared about was still alive and safe. His mother calling him to eat. His friend showing up with something for him, all smiles. His girlfriend making plans for their next date. Just thinking about it made his chest ache, because every one of those moments had been stolen from him, destroyed by these gods. And as if to twist the knife even further, the god made him watch as they shattered the planet that carried every one of those memories. But this is where everything changes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. Their threats didn't shake him, not even a little. He calmly told the creature that he would be back, because this S-rank card number 5 held a power that even a god could not control. He even gave them a backhanded compliment, admitting that for once they had actually created something impressive. But what exactly could this card do? Deep down, he felt a wave of quiet relief that he had held onto this card all the way until the very end. This was his one and only shot, a chance to undo every regret, to let everyone live again. He activated the S-rank time reversal card, a card that does exactly what it sounds like. It resets time itself. Everything returns to its original state. All memories are erased. Except for the users, a complete restart, a second chance to rewrite destiny. The god hadn't seen that coming. It never expected he had actually obtained this card. But rather than being threatened, it was amused. If anything, it was now even more intrigued by him. It looked forward to the next time they would meet. The card's effect activated and time reversal began. Before the world rewound completely, he left the god with one final warning: clean yourself up and wait for his return. Because the next time they meet, he will personally destroy every last one of them. This time, he would not let them take everything from him again. Time continued to rewind until he finally opened his eyes. He shot upright, gasping for air. And after a moment to catch his breath and collect himself, it hit him: he actually came back. One look at the hospital gown on his body and he already knew: Kingshan City Psychiatric Hospital. He was certain of it. Then the door opened and his mother walked in. She gently asked if he had been seeing those bad things again. She told him not to be afraid. He froze the instant he saw her. In his previous life, from the moment he was dragged into the day of confinement, he never saw his mother conscious again. Her mind had been swallowed by the game, trapped inside forever, while her body in the real world became nothing more than a vegetable. The last time she had spoken to him like this was years and years ago, so he crossed the room and pulled her into a tight hug, telling her how much he had missed her. She was confused, a little flustered. She told him she had always been right there with him. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she quietly worried, had his condition gotten worse again? Our MC is Luoshi, a patient at Kingshan City Psychiatric Hospital. Since childhood, he has suffered from severe dissociative identity disorder, what most people would call multiple personality disorder or schizophrenia. But what if it was never just an illness? Because in reality, there really had been multiple voices speaking inside his head all along. He always knew it wasn't just noise. The problem was no one around him ever believed him. Because of this diagnosis, he had been stuck in a hospital bed his whole life, unable to work, unable to live normally, unable to even fall in love. But none of that feels like a burden to him anymore. A simple, peaceful life where everyone is still alive, that's the dream he's been carrying with him across lifetimes. But he didn't have much time left. He checked his phone. 17:26. He remembered it perfectly. The day of confinement descends on February 23rd at exactly 6 p.m. That gave him only 34 minutes of freedom, and every single second counted. The game works by forcibly dragging a player's consciousness into its world. Once you're pulled in, fail to clear the dungeon and you can never return. Die inside and your body in reality becomes brain dead, a vegetable with no one home. But there's one small mercy. The very first time a player is pulled in, they are always guaranteed to enter an E-rank starter dungeon. And as for starter dungeons, aside from a handful of tricky ones, most of them are actually manageable if you know the hidden rules. With how fast he writes, he could get everything down in just 10 minutes. He needed to write it in a way his mother could actually understand. Only then would she be able to remember the rules and have a real shot at surviving, and he needed 2 copies because Ching would be arriving soon. This was the only way to save them both. His mother told him it was fine for him to write but reminded him not to push himself too hard. The doctor had said he still needed to rest. After that, she headed downstairs to throw out the trash and gently pulled the door closed behind her. She had always been like this ever since he was small. His father had wanted to abandon him, but his mother refused. She insisted on getting him treated no matter what it took. After draining every last bit of their savings, his father still chose to walk away, abandoning both him and his mother without looking back. From that point on, she raised him alone. Even after exhausting days at work, she still made time to sit with him and teach him how to read. Back then, he was too young to understand the weight of everything she was carrying. Only after losing everything, did he finally realize that he had been given everything from the very start. Then the door opened again. This time, it was his friend Ching showing up with a bag of Liuoshi's favorite tangerines in hand. He greeted him with a grin, saying it had been a while. Ching looked genuinely puzzled. It hadn't been that long at all. He had just visited 3 days ago. This buzzcut guy was Liuoshi's one and only friend. They'd grown up in the same community. Back then, word spread fast about his illness, and most parents warned their kids to keep their distance. Some kids even bullied him just to prove how fearless they were, because apparently that's how courage works when you're young and stupid. That was how he met Ching. One day when the bullying was happening, Ching stepped in and put a stop to it, then casually declared that Liuoshi was his friend just like that, and from that moment on, everything changed. But in Liuoshi's previous life, Ching died a terrible death inside a dungeon, sacrificing himself just to help him clear the game. His last words were simple: keep living and win. So in this life, Liuoshi swore on everything he had that tragedy would never happen again. Ching peered over at what he was writing and asked if it was a novel. He wanted to take a look. Liuoshi told him it was a dungeon-clearing strategy guide. Ching blinked, confused. He asked whether the doctor had actually approved him playing games and got genuinely worried. They had said games could make his condition worse. Liuoshi calmly replied that this was a game that simply had to be played. That made Ching light up immediately. He figured it must be some absolute masterpiece of a game, so good that even doctors couldn't keep you away from it. Liuoshi confirmed it. He told Ching he was almost done and asked him to read it carefully. Then he instructed him to track down his mother and have her read the other copy. Ching was surprised even his mother would be playing. Liuoshi told him not to worry about the details and just focus on reading it properly. He stressed that Ching should memorize as much of it as possible, because when the moment came, that knowledge could mean the difference between life and death. Ching agreed, but he couldn't quite shake the feeling that Liuoshi was acting strange today. He left the room. To protect the people he loved and to defeat the evil gods, his priorities were crystal clear. He had to become the strongest player all over again. That meant clearing every dungeon and collecting all 15 S-rank cards hidden across the game. In Day of Confinement, players earn cards by clearing dungeons or slaying monsters, ranging all the way from E-rank up to S-rank. There are item cards, special cards, weapon cards, and attribute cards. Each one grants abilities that go well beyond what any normal human is capable of. But S-rank cards are a different beast entirely. There are only 15 of them in existence, each one completely unique, with abilities so powerful that even the evil gods themselves cannot control them. just like the time reversal card he had used. These cards were his only real shot, his only path forward. Gathering all 15 was the only way he could ever amass enough power to stand against the gods themselves. The time on his phone reads 17:58, no, 17:59, 1 minute left before the day of confinement descended. This peaceful, ordinary life was about to be ripped away from him again. Then a notification appeared. He had been selected as part of the first wave of players. The dungeon began loading, his soul was forcibly extracted from his body, and a flood of scenario memories poured into his mind. In that moment, he made a vow. He would protect everything he held dear, clear every dungeon, and claw his way back to the top. And when that day finally came, he would personally slaughter every one of those evil gods who had treated their world like nothing more than a game. He opened his eyes to the world of day of confinement. The system greeted him cheerfully and wished him a pleasant game. How polite of it. The system identified player Liuoshi. An E-rank initial dungeon, the Slaughter Company scenario, had been generated. Soul loading was complete. The system then attempted to delete his real-world memories and implant the scenario memories in their place. But then, an error, deletion of Liuoshi's real memories had failed. The dungeon boss was generated anyway, and he was granted permission to freely explore the dungeon. The system wished him a pleasant game again, exactly as he expected. Everything was playing out identical to his previous life. The day of confinement dungeon felt almost indistinguishable from the real world. In rookie dungeons, players have their real memories erased, tricked into believing this world is reality. But for some reason, Liuoshi's memories had stayed completely intact. Since everything was mirroring his previous life exactly, he already knew what was coming. Right now, he was inside the day of confinement game world, inside an E-rank initial dungeon called Slaughter Company. On the surface, it looked like a perfectly ordinary office, people sitting at desks, tapping away at keyboards, going about their day like everything was totally fine. But that illusion, it wasn't going to last long. Slaughter Company might be classified as a low-level E-rank dungeon, but clearing it means taking down 3 boss-level monsters, each one with different abilities, each one harder than the last. For anyone coming in blind with no idea what they're doing, this dungeon is genuinely deadly. He opened his character attribute panel. It displayed his name, Liuoshi, level 0, race, human, everything else was locked. Basic attributes, skills, items, all grayed out. Even the global player kill contribution ranking was inaccessible. The only thing that stood out was a single notation, an unidentifiable blessing. He quickly assessed his situation. Right now, he was a complete rookie, 0 stats, 0 gear. In this state, taking on all 3 bosses was flat out impossible. First things first, he needed to unlock his attributes. He turned his attention to the blessing. There was a strong chance it was connected to why he had retained his memories from his past life. But this wasn't the time to get lost in theories. His priority was clear: gain enough power to take down the first boss. He started thinking through the fastest way to break out of this starting position. Then something clicked. Hidden inside this dungeon was a side mission. If he could complete it, grab the attribute cards from the reward and plan his next moves carefully, clearing the dungeon would become a whole lot more manageable. The dungeon officially kicks off at 11 p.m. He had just under 10 minutes, barely enough time, but more than enough to flip the game entirely in his favor. But there was one more thing keeping his mind occupied: the voice. The same one he had heard during his rebirth, the same one that had echoed in his head since childhood, written off as auditory hallucinations. But this time it was clearer than ever before. This time the voice spoke about saving Earth and defeating the evil gods. It said that to win, he would need to join forces with them, only then would they stand any real chance. It even suggested that if they could retain memories after the next reset, they could eliminate the gods together in the next cycle. The voice seemed to believe that Liuoshi, having returned to the past, could influence them even if they currently had no memories of their own. But who exactly were they? He tried to work out what it meant. Was it saying that by collecting all 15 S-rank cards, he could also tap into their power? He made his way to the restroom. For now, though, he pushed those thoughts to the back of his mind. He had arrived at his target. First objective: trigger the hidden side mission and secure the reward chest. The system chimed in, notifying him that he had reached a special coordinate location. Hidden side mission activated. The mission name: the secret hidden in the men's toilet stall. Truly legendary naming conventions on display here. Now that the prompt had appeared, it was time to get to work. A creature materialized out of nowhere. Glowing red eyes, stubby little horns, a round beast-like face, and instead of being terrifying, it just looked confused and kind of annoyed. Like it had been sitting in that stall for way too long. The toilet stall creaked open and the system identified the creature, the urban legend ghost, Coward. This small but supposedly ferocious little thing stood guard over a treasure chest. Luoshi glared at it and told it coldly to get lost unless it wanted its head twisted off. The creature froze, then panicked and bolted. Just like that, he had defeated the urban legend ghost coward and claimed the treasure chest. Despite its role as a guardian, it was about as dangerous as its name suggested. One solid intimidation and it was gone without throwing a single punch. The chest itself required a key to open, which would normally be a problem. Luoshi didn't even hesitate, he just stomped on it. Mysterious treasure chest now thoroughly damaged. Most people get thrown off by the key requirement and walk away empty-handed. But the moment you let go of fear and overthinking, this mission is actually straightforward, even for a complete beginner. And inside, he found exactly what he was looking for. The chest contained 3 items: an E-rank stamina card, an E-rank agility card, and an E-rank strength card. The 3 basic attribute cards. With these, he could finally unlock his player attributes and get the ball rolling. He used all 3 immediately. His stamina, agility, and strength activated, each raised to level 1 with a cap of level 5. All 3, same ceiling. The boost wasn't earth-shattering, but it was real and it was tangible. And for where Luoshi stood right now, it was exactly enough to take on the 3 bosses ahead. When he pulled up the system panel again, his basic attributes were finally visible. The moment a player uses attribute cards and activates their panel, they officially become a player in the truest sense. And even at level 1, they are already operating on a level that normal humans simply cannot match. Without warning, he threw a punch straight into the wall. A dent formed instantly. With these stats, plus the combat experience carried over from his past life, clearing this dungeon had just gone from a struggle to something relatively manageable. But he knew this was nowhere near the level he needed to take down those gods and protect everything he cared about this time around. He had to squeeze every advantage available to him, including whatever power was behind that mysterious voice in his head. So he decided to investigate the unidentifiable blessing first. He spoke out loud, asking directly, was the one who gave him the blessing the same entity behind the voices? He wanted an answer. Even as he asked, he figured there was almost no chance he'd actually get one. Then a voice answered. It said, "That depends on him." A massive shadow materialized around him. His guard shot up instantly. He scanned the space around him and then he saw them. Silhouettes surrounding him from every direction. They told him they had been watching all along. He asked who they were and why they had helped him. They didn't give a straight answer. Instead, they told him that if he wanted their help, he would first need to prove his worth. They told him to go fight. Time was almost up. Luoshi didn't hesitate. If earning their power meant a better shot at defeating the gods, then he would prove himself. Simple as that. Right on cue, the system announced that the countdown was ending. The boss had been generated and conquest mode was now active. All players were welcome to the Day of Confinement world. The current dungeon was an E-rank challenge. The boss was descending. Players were advised to prepare themselves. But there was a catch. Once the countdown hit 0, any player found away from their workstation would be automatically judged as a failure. And the timer had already started. 48 seconds left on the clock, less than a minute. But with his agility boost active, Luoshi knew he could make it. He broke into a full sprint, reached the gate in time, survive, miss it, instant death, no second chances. The timer dropped to 18 seconds. Somewhere nearby, a group of thugs started mouthing off about the countdown. The one with the mohawk flat-out refused to play along. The bald, heavyset guy beside him was already threatening to smash everything if they weren't let go immediately. Luoshi ran straight past them without slowing down. Just as expected, no matter when or where, there are always people who completely fail to read the room. The timer hit 0. Luoshi made it inside safely. The ones who had stepped outside, their heads exploded. Blood splattered across the floor and windows. Everyone who witnessed it went dead silent. Fear spread through the room in an instant because the reality of the situation had just become impossible to deny. This game is real. In this place, you break the rules, you die, period. The gate slammed shut behind them and the entire atmosphere shifted. Whatever was coming next was going to be worse. A warning message appeared. The boss of this level was about to spawn. Players were advised to locate nearby weapons and prepare to face the E-rank boss, the cleaner squad. People lost it. They shouted, demanded answers, begged to be let out. Then several silhouettes appeared laughing. The first boss had arrived. To clear this dungeon, all bosses must be defeated. The cleaners got to work. Leading the charge was the cleaning captain, a level 2 E-rank boss. It had level 1 stamina, level 2 agility, and level 4 strength. Its passive boost sat at level 2. Weapons of choice, a steel broom and a sharp dustpan, both E-rank. Its skill, cleaning specialization, bumps its strength up by 1 additional level whenever it's using cleaning tools, which, given what it's carrying, is basically always. Behind it marched the general cleaners, level 1 E-rank monsters, each packing level 1 stamina, agility, and strength. armed with steel brooms, no special skills, and this is just the first boss wave. Someone in the crowd asked what kind of monsters these even were and what E rank was supposed to mean. A muscular man pushed forward and told everyone to calm down. He declared confidently that he would take them all out with his bare hands. Every word out of his mouth dripped with arrogance. Liuoshi immediately told him not to go. He warned him that these things could not be judged by normal standards. Acting recklessly right now was a death sentence. Because even at level 1, as long as a monster's attributes were above 0, it was already operating beyond what any regular human body could handle. The idea that someone could punch their way through a boss with raw strength alone was pure delusion. The man snapped back and told him to shut up, especially coming from the guy who had barely stumbled through the gate at the last second. He wrote Liuoshi off as someone who had only survived through sheer luck, with zero right to be giving anyone advice. This muscular guy fancied himself a gamer. He had already clocked that the leaderboard ran on global kill contribution points, not just raw kills. The board was still locked in his view, but in his head he was already convinced that landing the first hit would cement him a top rank. On top of that, he figured a game this dangerous had to come with insane rewards. He was already mentally spending his winnings, billions in cash, luxury, everything, mansions, the whole fantasy playing out in vivid detail. So he charged in. To him, this monster was just a stepping stone, but in the very next instant the cleaning captain swung, and his head was cut clean off. It hit the floor and rolled. Everyone who saw it just froze. Then chaos erupted. The cleaning squad got to work and people scattered in every direction, screaming, running, desperately searching for a way out. But there was nowhere to go. They begged to be released, but it was already too late. Most of them had already taken hits. Yuashi moved. He stepped in and landed a punch on one of the general cleaners, declaring that its opponent was now him. His strength boost gave him +1 if the target's level was 5 or below, and it was. The cleaner was sent flying and smashed into the wall. Liuoshi shouted to everyone around him if they wanted to survive, there was only one option: kill the boss. And for him personally, if he was going to grow strong enough to collect S-rank cards and take down the gods, then cutting through low-level bosses like this was the only way forward. The others were stunned. Someone was actually fighting back and not just surviving but winning. The muscular guy had been one-shot, yet this person was holding his ground without breaking a sweat. But the monster still hadn't gone down. It was still moving. Liuoshi didn't hesitate. He grabbed it and drove it into the ground with another punch. This time its body began to fade. It was dead. The system only sends a reward notification when a monster is truly finished. No notification means the job's not done, so it's always cleaner to make absolutely sure. From the kill, Liuoshi obtained a steel broom, an E-rank weapon that grants a +1 strength bonus. The system also confirmed that he had defeated a level 1 cleaning worker and rewarded him with a strength card, an E-rank card that increases strength by 1, applicable up to level 5. The crowd stared in disbelief. He had just put down a monster like it was nothing. People started murmuring, who was this guy? How was he even stronger than the muscular man who had charged in so confidently? Low-level monsters can drop anywhere from 1 to 3 cards, strength, agility, or stamina. Right now, Liuoshi needed stats above everything else, so every single card he picked up had value. He used the card. His strength rose to level 2. Another general cleaner closed in on him. E-rank monster, level 1 strength. In the world of Day of Confinement, once a player activates their stats, even a single level difference creates a massive gap in power. Liuoshi was now sitting at level 2 strength, plus an additional +1 from his weapon. The math wasn't in the monster's favor. It attacked and never stood a chance. Liuoshi swung his steel broom and dropped it in one hit. The kill rewarded him with another strength card, same as before, E-rank +1 strength applicable up to level 5. Strength, level 3, then a spike of danger instinct. Another general cleaner rushed him from the side. Liuoshi reacted instantly and took off its head. Way too slow, the kill dropped an agility card, E-rank +1 agility applicable up to level 5. Agility was everything when it came to staying alive. This was exactly what he needed. At that point, the cleaning captain and the last remaining cleaner both locked their attention onto him, calling him hateful trash. The aggro system was working exactly as expected. The more monsters a player eliminates, the more they become the primary target. High performance comes with high danger, that's just how the game works. The cleaning captain's skill, Cleaning Mastery, stacks an extra 2 levels of strength on top of its base stats. Charging head-on into multiple enemies right now would be reckless and stupid. He needed to whittle them down one at a time. They squared off. Then Liuoshi made his move, and it wasn't what anyone expected. He turned and ran, shouting at the others as he went. If they didn't want to die, they needed to throw objects at the monsters, slow them down, create openings for him to close in and finish them. Since he had full aggro, the others were relatively safe. Their only job was to support from a distance. He was also quietly evaluating them at the same time. If anyone showed real potential under pressure, he could bring them along for future dungeons. The more people who learned how to actually survive these stages, the more lives could be saved down the line. But no one moved. If they acted, they might draw the monster's attention, and once a monster locked onto you, that was it. So they stood frozen, watching Luoshi fight alone, holding onto the quiet hope that maybe he could handle everything himself. Luoshi clocked it immediately. Not a single person was willing to act. He quickly accepted the reality. Waiting for them wasn't going to work. He would have to manufacture his own opening. The cleaning captain suddenly lunged at him. But just before it reached him, a keyboard slammed into its face from the side. Luoshi paused for a split second. Someone had actually moved. A nerdy-looking guy. He had actually done it. The others immediately turned on him, angry that he had interfered. He fired back. Luoshi was out there fighting for all of them. If they helped him, everyone could make it out. For once, someone in this room actually got it. One man grabbed him by the collar and shoved back, arguing that people like them had no business fighting monsters. At that exact moment, the cleaning captain spoke. It declared that trash needed to be cleaned. With its attention now redirected, they ran. The nerdy guy shouted to Luoshi that the aggro was drawn. Now was his chance to strike. Luoshi didn't need to be told twice. He dashed forward and cut down 2 general cleaners in a single fluid motion. With his current stat advantage, it wasn't even close. The cleaning workers couldn't put up any meaningful resistance. One-shotted both of them. Now only the boss remained. From the fallen cleaners, he obtained 2 cards, an E-rank agility card and an E-rank strength card. The cleaning captain raised its weapon, looming over the nerdy guy, declaring once again that trash must be cleaned. The man screamed for help. Then Luoshi appeared directly behind it. He said calmly, "The real trash is right here." And in the next instant, he took off its head. The system confirmed it immediately. Stage boss defeated. A player contribution rankings appeared. Luoshi sat at rank 1 with 700 points. A surge of anticipation ran through him. The player who finishes first receives S-rank card number 1. In his previous life, that card had always slipped through his fingers, and every S-rank card held terrifying, game-changing power. This time, he was determined to find out exactly what number 1 could do. Scanning the rankings, it was obvious that most players hadn't unlocked any skills yet, but Luoshi knew better than anyone holding onto first place wasn't going to be easy. This ranking pulled from every single player across the world who had been thrown into the initial stage simultaneously. The day of confinement had descended everywhere all at once. In his previous life, even though he had survived to the very end, there were players who showed extraordinary potential right from the opening stage, each one with unique abilities that no one else could replicate. Even now, having come back, he could not afford to underestimate a single one of them. Every time a stage was cleared, rewards were distributed based on ranking. From the second stage onward, he would need to run each one efficiently, maximizing his points and keeping an iron grip on first place. If he wanted any shot at defeating the evil gods, he needed power that completely eclipsed what he had built in his previous life. And to get there, he had to secure S-rank card number 1. First phase, boss of Slaughter Company, the cleaning captain. Cleared. His rewards, 1 E-rank stamina card, 2 E-rank agility cards, and 2 special cards, E-rank cleaning and E-rank iron embryo. The iron embryo immediately caught his eye. That single card made this entire run feel blessed. It allows the user to forge an E-rank weapon perfectly matched to their own aura. Iron embryo E-rank special card. When activated, it forges a personalized iron weapon calibrated to the user's aura, with a chance of producing something even rarer than expected. Among all weapon types, swords sit at the very top of the hierarchy, known as the Emperor of 100 Weapons or the King of 100 Weapons, depending on who you asked. If luck was on his side, this card alone could change everything. He glanced back at the nerdy guy. On the surface, he didn't look brave at all, but when the moment came and everything was on the line, he still chose to act. Reading the room clearly and acting on it anyway, that was the mark of someone who could become a real player. With the right guidance, this guy had the potential to help save a lot more people. Luoshi thanked him for drawing the boss's attention earlier. The nerdy guy shook his head. He said that Luoshi was the only one who could actually kill those things. If Luoshi had gone down, everyone in that room would have died. So really, he had just been helping himself. Luoshi gave a small smile and told him his judgment was solid. Then he held out 3 cards, stamina, agility, and cleaning. The first 2 would awaken his player attributes, while the cleaning card could clear negative mental effects when things got overwhelming. The nerdy guy hesitated. He felt like Luoshi needed those cards more than he did. But Luoshi wasn't having it. Without that distraction at the critical moment, things could have gone very differently. Those rewards were earned fair and square. He walked him through how to use them. The second stage was right around the corner, so there was no time to waste. Luoshi used another card on himself. The system updated immediately. His strength and agility climbed to level 4 while his stamina held at level 1. Watching it happen in real time, the nerdy guy finally clicked on how the system actually worked. And the moment he used his own cards for the first time, he actually felt it. His body felt lighter, faster, like something inside him had just woken up. He checked his own status panel. Name, Shu Wen, level 0, experience 70 out of 100, stamina and agility both at level 1, skills and items still locked, no equipment yet. He was genuinely surprised he had gained experience even without landing a single killing blow on a monster. Luoshi explained it was because he had attacked the boss. When Luoshi finished it off, Wen still received shared experience from the kill. On top of that, leveling up provides a small boost to all stats, though it doesn't hit quite as hard as dedicated attribute cards. And then asked what level Luoshi was sitting at now. Luoshi said level 4. Wen couldn't hide how impressed he was. That was already considered remarkably high for this point in the game. Luoshi's current stats, level 4, 20 out of 500 experience, strength and agility both at level 4, stamina still sitting at level 1. Skills and items locked, no item cards obtained yet. Back in his previous life, a random card pull like this had never happened to him, so he was genuinely curious what kind of weapon would his aura actually forge. The iron in his hand began to shift and reshape slowly, taking on a form of its own. A blue vein sword emerged, sword-type weapon. Growth type, final grade, unknown, current grade, its exclusive skill, skyrending slash. Each attack stores blood energy within the blade. Once all nodes turn completely red, it unleashes a powerful sword wave. Special trait, every 10 levels it grants a randomly selected new skill. The weapon is permanently bound to its wielder through a soul brand, meaning it cannot be lost, stolen, traded, or dropped, not even in death. Luoshi was satisfied. A growth-type sword was already a great pull by any standard. The fact that it came preloaded with a skill on top of that made it exceptionally rare. It might only be E rank right now, but once the sword was fully charged, it could push into C rank combat territory. The ceiling on this thing was wide open. Wen stared at him in disbelief. Hearing Luoshi call something like that not bad made him realize these two were operating on completely different levels. In his previous life, Luoshi had wielded an S-rank weapon, the Flame Dragon Shadow. Compared to that, the blue vein sword still had a long road ahead of it, but it was a growth type. Its future potential was limitless. The system announced that all players had cleared Stage 1, Cleaning Crew. Immediately after, Stage 2 was revealed, Staff Cafeteria. All players were instructed to make their way to the second floor and enter the cafeteria. Anyone who failed to arrive before the countdown ended would be eliminated. Timer 5 minutes. Everything was playing out exactly the same as his previous life. Back then, he had been a helpless beginner with nothing, completely different from the person standing here now. Luoshi turned to Wen and asked if he wanted to come along. Wen hesitated for a moment. He asked if he really could. Luoshi needed people like him, people who could think under pressure. Having someone like that in his corner would help him clear stages faster and build toward his larger goals. Wen had already proven he belonged. Wen agreed without a second's delay. He said he was willing to follow him. Luoshi nodded and brought him along. As they moved, voices rose behind them. Some people begged to be included. A few wealthy-looking individuals offered money on the spot. Others promised they would do absolutely anything, just please take them with him. Then a group of bullies stepped forward and blocked their path. They argued that since Luoshi clearly had the power to save people, he had an obligation to take everyone along. They even called him selfish, accused him of treating their lives like they were worthless. Luoshi's expression went cold. He told them flatly if they kept blocking his path, he wouldn't mind treating them the same way he treated the monsters. They backed off immediately. Everyone else could only watch in silence. The look in his eyes alone was enough to shut down the entire room. When quietly asked if he was really not going to bring them, Luoshi replied that by killing the boss, he had already saved their lives once. But when it actually mattered, not one of them had the courage to act. Bringing people like that along would only become a liability later. He wasn't on some grand mission to save everyone. He wasn't built to be that kind of hero. If anything, he was selfish, completely and honestly selfish. All he wanted was to save the people he actually cared about, Wen understood. He promised to pull his weight and never become a burden. Luoshi gave him a quick rundown. The next boss would be the chef. Mental corruption would almost certainly be involved. If it became too much to handle, Wen should use the cleaning card immediately. Wen processed that, imagining it as some kind of debuff mechanic. They arrived at the staff cafeteria and were instructed to take a seat as the second phase began. Wen noticed the smell immediately, and to his surprise, it actually smelled good. For a brief, hopeful moment, he wondered if maybe there wasn't any real danger just yet. Then a black shadow wrapped in red mist materialized and calmly announced 1 minute remaining. A chill ran straight down Wen's spine. Luoshi explained quietly those figures were executioners. They handled the latecomers. Wen connected the dots instantly, thinking back to what had happened earlier when the players who missed the office gate timer had their heads blown clean off. Luoshi picked a seat. They were the first ones there. Wen found it strange the distance between the office and the cafeteria wasn't that far. There was no good reason for people to be running late. Luoshi explained it plainly. People who make the right call quickly will always make it in time. But most people hesitate, burning precious seconds agonizing over a choice they're terrified to commit to. Only when the last few seconds are ticking away do they finally force themselves to pick the option they were afraid of from the start. Sure enough, with 52 seconds left, people came flooding in, regret written all over every face. They had wasted critical time upstairs arguing about whether to move at all. Someone in the crowd was already screaming at people to stop thinking and just go inside or they would die. But for some, the calculation had already run out. 10 seconds left. Those who made it in let out a collective breath of relief, scrambling to find any available seat. The countdown hit 0. The last man barely stumbled through the door, doubled over, gasping. He told himself he was safe, he had made it inside, he wasn't outside. And then the executioner moved, one clean strike and he was cut down. Time was up, he hadn't made it. The room went completely silent. Everyone had assumed that figure was the stage boss, but seeing it cut down someone who was already inside made the truth hit hard. If they hadn't hesitated for so long upstairs, that man would still be alive. Then the real boss appeared. The chef, a humanoid figure draped in black, surrounded by drifting red mist, pushing a cart with a massive pot perched on top. It began to serve the food. Each person at the table received a portion. What was in the bowls was horrifying, a sickly green substance with shapes that looked unmistakably like eyeballs and fingers. Wen felt his stomach lurch, and then it clicked. Those were the monsters from the first stage. A system effect activated. Anyone who looked directly at the meal received a mental corruption debuff. Strength and agility both dropped by 20% and spirit dropped by 30%. Wen's eyes went wide. The debuff was real, 3 stats tanking simultaneously. The situation had just become a whole lot more dangerous. And it didn't stop there. The system announced that all players must consume their meal. Wasting food would draw punishment from the chef. Leaving it untouched would drain spirit by 10% per minute. If spirit hit 0, the player would suffer a complete mental collapse and be eliminated. 7 minutes on the clock. Wen was stuck and he knew it. Eat it and face the consequences. Don't eat it and still face the consequences. There was no real choice here, and yet how was anyone supposed to actually swallow something like that? Compared to the first stage, this felt impossible. Despair started creeping in. Luoshi stayed completely calm. He told Wen that even though the second stage was more dangerous, there was still a clear way through it and he already knew exactly how. Wen felt the tension in his chest ease slightly, knowing Luoshi already had a plan. He told him that whatever he needed, he was ready. Luoshi kept it simple: stay put and wait. If his spirit dropped too low, use the cleaning card to clear the debuff and stay conscious. And when the time came, Luoshi would call him. The system notified him that mental pollution was still active and spirit was continuously decreasing. Current spirit, 70%. Time before total collapse, 6 minutes and 59 seconds. Wen muttered that just looking at the food was already draining him. Nearby, a woman at another table was fighting the urge to throw up, panic setting in as she did the math: 7 minutes, and if they didn't eat, they'd lose their minds. The man across from her looked sick at the thought of actually putting any of that in his mouth. Luoshi assessed the situation with clear eyes. With attributes suppressed by mental pollution, a direct head-on fight against the chef monster was basically off the table. The standard way to clear this stage was straightforward: eat the meal, lower the chef's guard, then organize everyone to take it down together. It was the safest route, but it also came with the lowest possible rewards. Then something unexpected happened. Luoshi received an unknown blessing: complete immunity to mental pollution. His spirit snapped back to 100% instantly. The voice returned, noting that this was just a small gesture of good faith. If he wanted their real help, he would need to prove his value first. Luoshi was stunned. Mental interference had 0 effect on him now. That changed everything. He could now execute the high-difficulty hidden rules that he had discovered in his previous life to clear this stage. If he pulled it off, he wouldn't just survive, He would dominate the scoreboard, hold on to first place, and walk away with rewards far beyond what the standard route offered. Then someone at a nearby table snapped. He slammed his hands on the table and declared at full volume that he would never eat that thing even if it killed him, and then he threw his plate across the room. When asked quietly if that man had already mentally collapsed, Liuoshi confirmed it. A person's spirit is far more fragile than the stat number implies. If someone's mental endurance is too low to begin with, they can't resist mental pollution at all. And if the stage goes uncleared, every single person in that room would end up the same way. The man in the background had moved on to stomping on his plate, repeating over and over that he wouldn't eat it. Then something hit him from above. A chef brought a spiked bat down on his head and told him plainly if he refused to eat, then he could just die. The man, even through the pain, kept insisting that he wouldn't eat. The chef grabbed him by the head and dragged him toward the kitchen. The rest of the room watched in horror. The message was clear: refuse to eat and that was your fate. A woman cried out that no one could physically stomach something like this. 6 minutes left on the clock. Someone else wondered out loud whether they were all going to end up the same way. The system announced a penalty. No player had consumed their meal, resulting in a minus 10% spirit penalty. All players' current spirit had dropped to 60%. They were urged to eat as soon as possible. The hidden high-score clearing condition for this stage was to break away from the safe standard method entirely. His plan was to activate the high-difficulty route and clear it that way. He stood up, ready to execute. He threw his plate to the floor and declared that he would not be eating. Step 1. Trigger high-difficulty mode and pull the attention of a monster chef. The system warned him immediately he had attracted the attention of a chef. His risk of death had increased to 80%. A chef approached and ordered him to sit down, refuse to eat, and it would force his head into the pot itself. Step 2. Activate the hatred system and take down one monster chef. Liuoshi moved instantly and drew his blade and swung. The head dropped. The system confirmed the kills. Serving chef level 3 defeated. Rewards: 2 E-rank attribute cards, strength and stamina. With that, stage 2 of Slaughter Company officially entered combat phase. After using the cards, his strength climbed to level 5 and his stamina rose to level 2. The system issued 2 simultaneous warnings. First, killing a chef had spiked the remaining 3 chefs' aggro toward him to 100%. Second, he had triggered the hidden rule: strike first. All chefs would now completely ignore every other player and focus entirely on eliminating him. In exchange, the points and rewards from every monster he killed were increased by 10%. This was the high-difficulty hidden clearing rule of Stage 2, strike first. The fish-killing chef level 3, the fruit platter chef level 3, the vegetable-cutting chef level 3, all 3 entered an enraged state simultaneously. Their killing intent surged. Liuoshi understood exactly what that meant. By ditching the standard strategy and striking first, he had pulled every single point of aggro in the room onto himself, making him the sole target of every monster present. That dramatically increased his chances of dying on the spot. To survive and still have enough left in the tank to handle the real boss, he couldn't afford to get surrounded or take unnecessary damage. He had to be smart about this. He needed to stick to the plan. With all aggro locked onto him and no need for bait anymore, there was only one move: run. But one of them caught up faster than expected. The chef sneered, telling him there was nowhere to run, he'd be carved into pieces. Liuoshi blocked the butcher knife with his sword. The chef was visibly surprised. He had actually stopped the attack. Liuoshi smirked and challenged it, asked if it could keep up with what came next. Then he unleashed a rapid series of cuts at E-rank speed. Everything was going exactly as planned. The monster had taken the bait completely. He couldn't take down the boss just yet, his stats weren't there. So instead, he was using the smaller enemies to charge up the blue vein sword. Blades clashed back and forth. The monster was genuinely shocked that Liuoshi was matching its speed. Among all the chefs, it was the fastest. But it still believed he would eventually break. After all, he was locked in a duel with it and the other chefs were already flanking from behind. They surrounded him. Liuoshi shifted his momentum. With one powerful swing, he knocked the chef's blade completely out of its hands. The monster froze. That strength was higher than it had calculated. Based on everything it had assessed, Liuoshi should have been roughly its equal, not stronger. What it didn't know was that Liuoshi had already activated the Blue Vein Sword's exclusive skill, Skyrending Slash, and had been quietly thanking the monster the whole time for helping him charge it up. The moment the monster put it together, it already knew it was done. Liuoshi had always had the strength, he had just been using the exchange to build his charge. By the time it figured out the trap, the other chefs were already closing in on Liuoshi from all sides. It shouted at the others, "Run." It was a trap, too late. Liuoshi struck first. In the sequence that followed, he took down all three: the fish-killing chef, the fruit platter chef, and the vegetable-cutting chef, one after another. He noted calmly that a flaw visible to the naked eye is usually a trap set up in advance. From the kills, he collected 6 cards total, 3 E-rank stamina cards and 3 E-rank agility cards. When finally exhaled, everything Liuoshi had done from the very start had been part of a deliberate plan. The system issued a new warning: a player had successfully triggered the strike first hidden rule. As a result, the stage boss, the head chef, had entered a fully enraged state. Rage value boosted by 100%, all attributes increased by 1 level. Wen's jaw dropped. He hadn't even known hidden rules were a thing. The door at the far end of the room began to creak. Liuoshi already knew exactly what was coming through it. The ground started to tremble. Everyone felt it. Fear spread through the cafeteria like a wave. If Liuoshi couldn't put this thing down, none of them were walking out of here. This was the final condition of the strike first hidden rule, forcing the boss to appear ahead of schedule with increased difficulty. But in return, it also pushed the rewards and points significantly higher. Because all conditions of strike first had been met, the boss's difficulty had increased substantially. At the same time, the rewards and points for defeating it were boosted by 30%. Liuoshi didn't even hesitate. He needed those rewards. The only way to reach his goal was through higher rankings and greater power. There was no shortcut. The head chef wrapped one massive hand around the door frame and wrenched it open. It demanded to know who had killed its subordinates. The head chef, E-rank boss, level 5. In its fully enraged state, all attributes had been bumped up by 1 level. Base stats: stamina level 6, strength level 8, agility level 3. Its skill, bone-splitting tendon severing, stacked even further onto its already brutal strength. Wen stared at it in terror. Could Liuoshi actually win this? Liuoshi didn't answer. He just used every attribute card he had left. Against a boss supercharged by hidden rules, holding anything back was not an option. Liuoshi's attributes were now all at level 5. E-rank attribute cards cap out at level 5. That meant the 2 E-rank agility cards he still had were now completely useless to him. So he tossed them over to Wen and told him to use them immediately. Wen activated the cards. His agility jumped to level 3 while his stamina stayed at level 1. The others who watched it happen were instantly hit with regret. If they had acted sooner, they could have had attribute cards too. Some were now genuinely wondering what those cards actually did, and whether they would have made any difference in surviving what was coming. Head chef roared again, demanding to know who had killed its people. The sheer force of its voice made the room tremble. Just hearing it made any thought of resistance feel futile. No one could even imagine how a person was supposed to fight something like that, but Wen noticed something. Even under that pressure, Liuoshi hadn't moved a muscle. The attribute cards had given him enough of a foundation to stand firm against the fear. The head chef ran out of patience. It threatened to chop off every head in the room if no one answered. Panic erupted. People started running in every direction. Someone stepped forward. Liuoshi, he positioned himself directly in the head chef's path and blocked its blade. The boss stopped for a brief moment, caught off guard. Liuoshi looked it dead in the eyes and admitted it calmly. He was the one who killed them. The head chef's expression twisted with pure rage. It declared that this ingredient would suffer the most painful death imaginable. It would keep his head intact, just so he could watch everyone around him die first. Liuoshi didn't flinch. He replied simply, before any of that happens, he would cut off its head. The head chef let out a short laugh and told him to prove it. And then the fight exploded, blades colliding with devastating force, impact meeting impact. The entire area shook from the clash. When the dust started to settle, Wen desperately scanned the room for Liuoshi. Deep down, he already thought the outcome was obvious. Against level 8 strength, no one could survive a direct exchange. Then Liuoshi's voice cut through the air. He was fine. He even cracked a small joke, saying it had been a while since anyone called him boss. Back in his previous life, during the day of confinement, he had built a team. Those people trusted him completely, willingly followed him, called him their leader. But in the end, every single one of them died. He was the only one who made it out. And for the longest time, he could never understand why. The head chef charged again, calling him a short little ingredient, and lunged to cut him down. Back then, Liuoshi hadn't understood it. But now he finally did. A blade came down. Liuoshi parried it. The head chef froze for a split second. Liuoshi's speed had suddenly jumped beyond what it had clocked earlier. Then it realized he had been holding back the entire time. The reason he had survived to the very end of his previous life was simple. He never hesitated. Because compared to everyone else who played this game, he wanted to win more than any of them, so he struck and cut down the head chef. People who truly want to win will do whatever it takes. But after reaching the end once, Liuoshi had come to understand something important. Winning alone wasn't enough. What he truly wanted after all of it was to protect the people he loved, to protect the life he had once taken for granted, to go back to a normal world. The system confirmed it. Stage 2 boss of Slaughter Company, the head chef, defeated, rewards now available. Since the hidden rule Strike First had been activated, all rewards were increased by 30%. He received E-rank strength, stamina, and agility cards, each capable of raising the corresponding stat up to level 10, increasing it by 1 level per card. He also obtained a special E-rank card, Memory, which could restore a player's real-world memories. On top of that, a special bonus reward dropped, Head Chef's Surprise Buff. Once activated, it randomly boosts one attribute by 3 levels for 10 minutes. If he hadn't triggered the hidden rule, the memory card would have been his only reward. Everything else was pure bonus, and his contribution points had gone up significantly on top of all of it. He pulled up the rankings. Liuoshi rank 1, 1,700 contribution points. Hansen Hai rank 2, 300. Liu Yan rank 3, 260. Union rank 4, 220. After that, nobody else came close. Just like in his previous life, all of them were already there. Even with their points nowhere near his, these were not ordinary players. Every single one of them was a prodigy, and in the future they would become the core of humanity's resistance against the day of confinement. But Liuoshi knew the truth. The evil gods would never just sit back and let players grow unchecked. They would keep engineering increasingly brutal stages to cull the field. In his previous life, it was one of those vicious dungeons that wiped out the overwhelming majority of humanity's strongest players in one fell swoop. This time, when that stage appeared, he would be ready with the S-rank card designed specifically to counter it. And he genuinely looked forward to crossing paths with those players again, because to him, they were his former rivals. The system announced that Stage 2 Staff Cafeteria had been cleared. The final stage was revealed. Rush out of the company. All players were instructed to head to the ground floor lobby immediately. Anyone who failed to arrive before the countdown ended would be eliminated. The hardest stage was about to begin. Liuoshi turned to Wen and told him they were leaving. Wen felt a knot form in his stomach. But after a moment he spoke up. He said he had something to give Liuoshi. Slowly, he extended his hand. Liuoshi blinked, confused. Wen was handing him tissues. Wen said it wasn't much. He had just found them in the dining area and figured Liuoshi could at least wipe his face. He added quietly that he felt useless. If he could just do a little more, maybe Liuoshi wouldn't have to carry everything by himself. Liuoshi paused, and in that small, genuine moment he was reminded most people in this world were still fundamentally kind. He told Wen that he was already more useful than he realized. Wen looked visibly moved. Meanwhile, soldier-like monsters had begun gathering in the distance, forming up as if they already knew what was coming. Their captain gave a single order: eat them all. After the countdown ended, any player who had not arrived at the lobby would be judged as failed. Current countdown, 4 minutes and 36 seconds. Wen asked a question that had been sitting in his head. Had Liuoshi been relying on high agility to take down the head chef? He wondered whether having higher attribute levels just meant a player could bulldoze through anything. Liuoshi explained that it depended on the individual's baseline. People are different. Some are naturally built for athleticism, others for sharp thinking. That landed on Wen like a weight. He looked down at himself and accepted the reality. Someone like him, even with agility at level 5, would probably still struggle to dodge a direct attack. Then he glanced over at Liuoshi with a look of quiet admiration and guessed he must have had some kind of background, special forces, military training, something along those lines. They arrived at their destination. Liuoshi told Wen to stay there and hold everyone back as they arrived. He instructed him to make sure nobody tried to make a run for it. He then explained the most critical hidden rule of the next stage: anyone who attempted to flee would be automatically judged as having failed. Even if the main gate was standing wide open, escape was completely off the table. Wen's expression shifted with worry. He asked if Liuoshi was seriously going in there alone to deal with the next wave. Because from everything he had heard, what was coming sounded far too dangerous for one person. Wen promised to pass on the hidden rule to everyone. Internally, he was genuinely moved. Even someone like him was being trusted with something this important. To him, Liuoshi was someone who was both impossibly strong and quietly kind. In reality, having teammates in the next stage would trigger an additional hidden rule that made clearing it significantly easier. There were other hidden conditions stacked on top of that as well, but with his current level, attempting it completely alone was not a viable option. To play it safe, he needed to locate the player with the highest combat potential in this dungeon. Stage 3 of Slaughter Company required fighting through 10 level 5 security guards plus a level 7 security captain waiting in the lobby. Their strength far exceeded anything the second stage had thrown at them. From experience, teamwork was the only path through this stage. Going in solo would just mean getting surrounded and overwhelmed. As he made his way down the stairs, someone called out to him. Liuoshi smiled. This was exactly who he had been looking for. In his previous life, this man had become extremely well known. Slaughter Company's 3-star stages were notoriously brutal. Back then, success hadn't come from hidden rules alone. It had also depended on this man who carried the team as its core fighter. His name, Su Zhengyang, and in Liuoshi's previous life, this man had arguably stood out even more than Liuoshi himself. Zheng Yang confirmed it bluntly. Liuoshi was the one who had told that four-eyed shorty to warn everyone not to run. He didn't appreciate that. Liuoshi replied evenly that it was just a reminder. Zheng Yang admitted that Liuoshi's performance across the first 2 stages had been genuinely impressive. He hadn't even had a chance to get involved, but now he had a clear picture of how this game worked. He declared that he would face Liuoshi properly on equal footing, and then he charged forward. Liuoshi didn't move, he simply said Zheng Yang was not his opponent. He raised one hand and slapped him straight out of the air. Zheng Yang hit the ground and immediately understood that kind of strength was well beyond normal human capability. He assumed it had to be coming from the game system. Liuoshi confirmed it. He told him that the next stage was going to be extremely tricky, and if Zheng Yang was willing to team up, he would give him 3 attribute cards. Zheng Yang raised an eyebrow and asked what made him so confident he would agree. Liuoshi said he had something to show him first. He activated the memory card on Zheng Yang. One of the core cruelties of Slaughter Company is that it strips players of their real-world memories. Without those memories, people lose the emotional anchors that ground them. Without emotional anchors, there's no vulnerability to reach and, more importantly, no common foundation to unite around. Liuoshi had long since concluded that the gods understood human psychology with frightening precision. Fortunately, the memory card could give all of that back. In his past life, Liuoshi had seen exactly where Zheng Yang's weakness lay. That was why he was certain this would work. A memory surfaced in Zheng Yang's mind, a child. Zheng Yu, that single image was enough. In an instant he knew he had to survive. Someone was still waiting for him out there. He looked at Liuoshi and asked directly if they teamed up, could they actually clear the stage. Liuoshi answered without hesitation. Yes, he handed over the attribute cards. Zheng Yang accepted them and said he would remember the favor. His strength, stamina, and agility all rose to level 1. Liuoshi laid out the plan quickly. He needed Zheng Yang to hold back part of the enemy force while he handled the rest. Zheng Yang agreed. Liuoshi then used his E+ rank strength cards along with the head chef's surprise buff. His strength climbed to level 7. Even at level 7, it still wasn't quite enough to comfortably handle the next boss. To be safe, he needed to get to at least level 9. Everything now came down to what the buff would roll. The head chef's surprise buff activated. His strength shot up by 3 more levels. Duration, 10 minutes. The stage was now manageable, and there was still one more hidden rule in play that could push his strength even higher. The head chef's reward had turned out to be far more valuable than it looked. They stepped into the monster's territory. The security monsters were caught off guard. Only 2 people had walked in. They assumed the others must be hiding somewhere. One of them mocked how thin the 2 of them looked, barely any meat on them. Another one laughed about how many hits from their batons they could probably take. Zheng Yang felt the pressure immediately. This was his first time standing directly in front of monsters with the full weight of their killing intent pressing down on him. For a brief moment, the doubt crept in, could the 2 of them actually win this? Liuoshi stepped forward and declared flatly that the 2 of them were more than enough to put every single one of them down. Zheng Yang looked at him. There wasn't a trace of fear in Liuoshi's eyes, so Zheng Yang steadied himself and chose to stand his ground. The system announced that they had arrived at the ground floor lobby ahead of schedule and had initiated combat against the security team. The hidden rule, Reward of Courage, was now active. Both Liuoshi and Zheng Yang received an additional +1 strength boost. For that brief window, Liuoshi's strength reached level 11. The head chef's surprise buff had taken effect, stacking the 3-level bonus on top. His stamina and agility remained at level 5. Zheng Yang's strength sat at level 2, with stamina and agility both at level 1. The head chef's surprise buff had taken effect on him as well at level 1. With his power at that level, Liuoshi stepped forward and declared himself the one in charge of this stage. He charged in. Zheng Yang instinctively called out for him to wait. He thought it was too reckless. Back in his underground boxing days, Zheng Yang had faced plenty of opponents whose capabilities he couldn't read at a glance. And he always believed that in a situation like that, the right move was to observe carefully first, study how the opponent moved, and only then deliver the decisive blow. The monsters were locked on Liuoshi and fully intended to take him apart. From Zheng Yang's perspective, charging in head first without reading the situation first was a good way to walk into a wall. The monsters weren't impressed, these two looked weak. One of them decided to make the first move, but Liuoshi struck back first. In that instant, Zheng Yang understood with that level of speed and power, a second strike wasn't necessary. The other monsters sensed that something was off and decided to swarm together. The system issued a notice for all remaining players to head to the ground floor lobby immediately to participate in the final stage. Players who failed to arrive before the countdown ended would be judged as failed. 56 seconds remaining. Liuoshi knew this already. Even before the countdown ran out, anyone who entered the ground floor lobby would be attacked on sight. Another hidden, malicious rule baked into the game. 49 seconds left. He pushed to eliminate as many monsters as possible to carve out a space that was at least somewhat safe for Wen and the others when they arrived. Upstairs, Wen had already organized everyone and was leading them forward in a calm, orderly fashion. Liuoshi was glad to see it. Wen had already grasped his real intention. When Liuoshi had deliberately stopped midway and sent Wen back, Wen had figured out why. His role was to buy time and bring everyone in at the right moment, not a second early. 12 seconds left. Seeing an opening, Zheng Yang moved to step in and help. The monster in front of him seemed manageable enough. As if sensing what he was about to do, Liuoshi called out without looking, told him to hold off. His role was to protect the others. One of the monsters had already clocked that Liuoshi was too dangerous to engage directly. It gave the order, go after the weaker targets to recover. This became Zheng Yang's moment. The monster went for Wen first. Zheng Yang grabbed it by the head and punched it. He wasn't going to let it touch their people. He understood that Liuoshi didn't particularly care about everyone in that room, but he was still fighting to protect them. That meant there was a reason, and that was enough. But the monster was fighting back hard. He couldn't seem to deal any real damage, which made him genuinely wonder how was Liuoshi making it look so effortless. Wen told everyone around him to stay calm, don't move, and do not draw the monster's attention. He told them to trust the people out there fighting for them. The crowd listened. In that moment, all they could do was put their faith in them. They cheered for Liuoshi. Blue Vein Sword skill had finished charging. The monster captain gave the order, activate skills, converge on Liuoshi, end it in one move. Liuoshi was already thinking exactly that. He cut through all of them in a single strike. Wen and the others couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Every single one of them felt the same thing, how lucky they were that this person was on their side. Zheng Yang stared at him, breathing hard. One monster had left him completely exhausted. How was Liuoshi still standing like that? Liuoshi leveled his sword at the last remaining monster and said simply, "You're next." The final boss had arrived, the security captain, level 7 with level 10 strength, level 7 agility, and level 8 stamina, health at a full 100%. This thing was built different. The security captain locked eyes on Liuoshi and declared that killing someone like him would bring it genuine pleasure. The crowd was paralyzed with fear. With stats like that, Wen couldn't help but wonder, could Liuoshi actually win this? In his previous life, taking down the security captain had cost many lives and an enormous amount of time. But this time, Liuoshi just kept attacking. He alone was more than enough. Before the security captain could even wind up a single strike, Liuoshi had already landed multiple slashes across its body. Its form began to dissolve. At this point, Liuoshi sat at level 8 with 200 out of 1000 experience. His strength had surged to level 14 while his stamina and agility both held at level 8. His skills remained locked. In his hands, the blue vein sword. Active buffs: the head chef's surprise buff, the reward of courage adding 1 strength level, and the unidentifiable blessing still in effect. Every monster he had defeated throughout the stage dropped E++ attribute cards. Stacked on top of both active buffs, his strength had climbed all the way to level 14, a massive leap in combat power. And because he had cleared this entirely on his own, every drop of experience and every attribute card went straight to him. Back when he cleared this stage in his previous life, he had walked away at only level 2. Wen stared at him and quietly came to terms with something. His boss was on a completely different level. Almost not human. The others around him had already started mentally calculating how close they needed to stay to someone like that. Liuoshi glanced over at Zheng Yang's fight and judged that the last monster would go down soon enough. Zheng Yang declared that his next punch would settle it. The monster fired back that it would send him to his death. Then Liuoshi stepped in and cut the monster down without ceremony. He told Zheng Yang there was no need to push himself that hard. Zheng Yang was genuinely stunned. The monster he had been grinding against with everything he had, Liuoshi had just casually ended it. The gap between them hit him all at once. System announced it. The E-Rank Rookie Dungeon Slaughter Company had been fully cleared by all surviving players. The final contribution leaderboard: Liuoshi at 99, 9%, Zheng Yang at 0, 75% when at 0, 25% and everyone else sitting at a flat 0%. Liuoshi was genuinely curious what kind of extra rewards came attached to a 99.9% contribution score. He had never pulled numbers like this before. E-rank Dungeon Slaughter Company Clearance Reward Settlement was now processing. The Survival Clearance Reward and E-rank All Attribute Activation card was distributed to every surviving player. Everything obtained inside the dungeon could be carried back into the real world. The other players let out a collective sigh of relief when they saw they were receiving rewards too. It wasn't much, but surviving this place was not easy and they knew it. That was how it worked. As long as you survived, the basic rewards were yours, and those rewards were specifically designed to improve your odds of making it through the next dungeon. Liuoshi knew better than anyone that gaining sudden power could bring out the worst in people. Back in his previous life, he had watched it happen firsthand. This time around, he planned to push for player management laws as early as possible before these newfound abilities could be turned against ordinary people. To make that happen, he needed the backing of powerful real-world figures. And his position at the top of the leaderboard would be more than enough to draw them to him. The World Player Contribution Leaderboard dropped. Liuoshi rank 1 3,000 contribution points, Han Shenhai rank 2 510, Liu Yan rank 3 490, Yun Yan rank 4 480. The gap was enormous. Anyone who looked at that board could see immediately this was not a competition. He had dominated it entirely. All cleared players received their E-rank All Attribute Activation cards. Strength, agility, stamina, and mana all raised to level 1 across the board. The effect was immediate. Everyone felt it, bodies lighter, sharper, like something fundamental had shifted inside them. Wen couldn't hide his excitement when he received his updated stats: strength level 1, agility level 4, stamina level 2, mana level 1, small numbers but they were his. Zheng Yang rolled his shoulders and flexed his hands, quietly acknowledging just how much of a difference higher attributes actually made. Meanwhile, Liuoshi's current stats sat at level 8, strength level 15, agility level 9, stamina level 9, mana level 1. The head chef's surprise buff was still adding level 3 strength, and the reward of courage continued to stack level 1 strength on top. The stage contribution rewards were distributed on a sliding scale. The higher your contribution, the better your cut. Wen had already accepted that his reward would be modest. Zheng Yang, on the other hand, was replaying every moment he had hesitated and quietly kicking himself for not acting sooner. Even Liuoshi had no idea what was coming his way. In his previous life, he had never come close to contribution numbers like these, so this was uncharted territory for him too. Wen 0.25% contribution. Reward 1 E-rank strength attribute card. He hadn't expected to get anything at all, let alone an attribute card. Zheng Yang's 0.75% contribution. Reward 1 E-rank strength attribute card and 1 E-rank stamina attribute card. Seeing 2 cards drop made the value of contribution click for him immediately. Both of them turned their eyes toward Liuoshi, with 99.9%. Whatever he was about to receive had to be on a completely different level. And it was. Liuoshi himself found it fascinating, a reward tier he had never seen before. With 99.9% contribution, he received 3 items. First, an E+ rank max all attribute card capable of raising every attribute directly to level 10. Second, a special player class change card which allowed a random class change with a chance of pulling an S-rank top tier class. Third, a special permanent card, Team Formation, which allowed him to summon 2 players directly into any dungeon he entered. Growing stronger while simultaneously building his own faction, this reward covered both at once. His luck was anything but bad. Without warning, the ground began to shake. Everyone tensed up instantly. The dungeon scenery around them started fading and dissolving. A wave of relief swept through the crowd. This had to mean they were going home. Liuoshi confirmed it. He told them they could return now and to use the time to rest up. He then gave them one more thing to sit with. From the moment they were pulled into this game, the world had already changed. Something out there was actively trying to destroy their world, and this slaughter game was its weapon. The crowd couldn't wrap their heads around it. A game designed to kill them, actually real, actually happening. Liuoshi told them plainly, in the next dungeon, hold nothing back, clear it, kill the boss, and get stronger. He urged them to build enough strength to fight back, protect what they had, and push those things out of their world. Zheng Yang smirked. He called it a bold speech. Then the world dissolved and they were gone. Liuoshi had finished first on the World Player Contribution Leaderboard, and with that came his S-rank special card reward, a card holding power beyond even the gods. He would need to be careful with this one. A shadowy figure materialized before him, a man's silhouette, wings spread wide, a single eye at the center of his chest. It studied Luoshi in silence, then spoke. If Luoshi continued to perform at this level, it would grant him divine power. Luoshi woke up in a hospital bed. He exhaled slowly. He hoped someone had actually read what he wrote because saving the world was not a one-man job. A nurse spotted him and nearly jumped out of her skin. She ran to get the doctor immediately. The doctor ran through a full examination and came back with a clean report, mind clear, all vitals normal, no significant issues. Then the doctor told him something that stopped him. He had been in a coma for 3 days. And it wasn't just him. Hundreds of thousands of people across the world had fallen into a coma at the exact same time, but Luoshi was the first to wake up. The doctor couldn't make sense of it. How could that many people collapse simultaneously? He asked Luoshi directly. Did he know anything about this? Luoshi didn't answer. He was already looking for his mother. They walked to her hospital room. The doctor explained quietly that she had fallen into a deep coma on the same day as him. All her vitals were normal, but she wouldn't wake up. From a purely medical standpoint, his mother had already become a vegetable. Just like in his previous life, she had been selected as part of the first wave of players. The day of confinement didn't pull everyone in simultaneously. It worked in batches, waves of players dragged in one group at a time, and those who failed their dungeon would never return, left as empty shells, permanent vegetables. Coming back to this life, the single most important thing to him was making sure his mother never had to suffer through that again. He would give her a good life even if it cost him everything, and right now he had exactly the tool to make that happen. Entering Special Card Number 1, Freedom. Its ability, designate a single player so that the day of confinement can never select them again. On top of that, the user gains the ability to enter and exit game dungeons freely at will. He was going to use that card to set his mother free. Without warning, the room flooded with blinding light. The doctor stumbled back, asking what was happening. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He kept asking himself, how was this even possible? His mother's eyes opened. She blinked, confused, looking around the room like she wasn't sure how she had ended up there. He pulled her into a tight hug and held on. He promised her nothing would ever happen to her again. The doctor stood there speechless. In all his years of medicine, he had never witnessed anything like it. Meanwhile, out in the wider world, news of Luoshi's first-place ranking on the World Contribution Leaderboard had already begun to spread, and powerful people were starting to take notice. More than a few of them were already thinking the same thing, that in the world being reshaped by the day of confinement, this person might very well become its new ruler. Back with our MC, his mother told him in a slightly dazed voice that she had been in a very frightening amusement park. There were monsters everywhere and so many people. The monsters kept chasing them. He asked her what happened next. As she described it, it became clear what she had experienced was an amusement park-style initial dungeon. She continued, she saw a monster reaching out its claws toward her. Then everything went black and she remembered nothing after that. When she opened her eyes again, she saw him. She assumed it had just been a strange dream, but he knew it was anything but. Then a voice rang out from down the hall shouting that he had transmigrated. He recognized it immediately. Ching, and just like in his previous life, Ching had cleared his dungeon and woken up. Ching burst into the room, absolutely buzzing with energy, announcing that he had transmigrated into a game world just like a manga protagonist. He was completely floored by the whole thing. He went on, there had been a lot of people with him and a strong man and woman had led them all through the dungeon. Luoshi's mother asked curiously whether he'd had that same strange dream too. Luoshi watched him and couldn't help but notice Ching's childlike energy hadn't changed one bit. He brought him outside and told his mother to rest. Whatever needed to be said could be said out here. Ching asked whether Luoshi actually believed him, insisting that everything he said was completely true. Luoshi asked him, was it called Day of Confinement? Ching's eyes went wide. He couldn't figure out how he already knew. Luoshi told him that the things from inside could be brought back into reality, and he asked him to pull up the World Player Contribution Leaderboard. Ching blinked, not really following what he meant. He opened it anyway and went completely still. The name sitting in first place was not what he expected. Luoshi told him he was reading it correctly. He was ranked first in the entire world. Ching stared at the screen and could not process what he was looking at. Luoshi told him that after he used a certain card, he would receive a notification. It was the player class change card. He activated it. Classes in Day of Confinement were not something to take lightly. Class change cards were extraordinarily rare and each class had to be leveled up over time to reach its true potential. In the early stages, most classes seemed modest at best, but their ceilings were limitless and among all of them, 3 were considered to sit above the rest. The first was the Elementalist, capable of evolving into the 4 symbols ultimate, with mastery over wind, fire, water, and lightning. The second was the Dragon Blood Descendant, capable of evolving into the Black Flame Dragon King of Demise, transforming into a colossal dragon and unleashing waves of destructive black flame. The third and the rarest of all was the Seeker of Wisdom, which could evolve into the Sage of Time Crossing, granting control over time itself and the ability to interfere with the timeline. It was considered the single most powerful class in existence, and in his entire previous life, Luoshi had only ever spotted a few passing references to it in system messages. It had never actually appeared. The draw was completely random. He was genuinely curious what fate would hand him. And the words appeared on the screen, Apprentice of All Phenomena, a class he had never heard of in his entire previous life. His status panel updated, Class, Apprentice of All Phenomena. Grade, unknown, class talent, resonance of tools, the ability to perceive the underlying logic flowing within all things. Rather than relying on pure muscle memory, the user forms a deep connection with any tool they hold, weapons, ordinary objects, anything, until their mind and technique become a single unified motion. This class could evolve just like the others. But there was a catch. It had 5 stages of evolution, while most classes only had 3. The difficulty scaling was in a completely different league. He found himself genuinely curious about what this class would look like at its absolute peak. Even as the former strongest player in the world, that thought alone was enough to get him excited. Qing's jaw hit the floor when the system announcement rolled out. Luoshi had just become the world's first class holder. He stood there completely stunned, unable to form words. Luoshi glanced over and asked what he was trying to say. Qing immediately dropped to his knees, grabbed onto Luoshi's leg and started begging to be carried. Right on cue, the nurse appeared in the doorway and asked with visible uncertainty whether she had come at a bad time. She asked if something was wrong. Luoshi recognized the timing immediately. In his previous life, this was the exact moment the nurse had come to collect payment, and it had caused him no small amount of trouble. She explained that the hospitalization fees his mother had paid at the start of the year had been fully exhausted. On top of that, his own treatment fees had been overdue for more than a month. Qing immediately offered up his card. He still had a few thousand on it, but Luoshi waved him off. He told him to put it away. He would handle it himself. In his previous life, he had made money through deals with influential figures, working as their personal muscle. After all, a player's physical capabilities were in a completely different category from ordinary people. This time, he intended to carry the weight his mother had always shouldered alone. He was done being anyone's burden. Then the nurse's phone rang. She answered it, and her expression shifted completely. Whatever she was hearing was clearly not something she had expected. She told Luoshi he didn't need to worry about the fees anymore. Someone had already made an enormous payment on his behalf, enough to cover hundreds of years of hospital costs. It even covered the patient with the buzz cut. Qing pointed at himself and asked, did she mean him? He immediately denied any mental illness and made it very clear he was only there visiting a friend. Before anyone could respond, they heard a voice from down the hallway asking for Ward 226. A blonde man walked in. Behind him were a green-haired woman and a man in a striped suit. The blonde man asked if Luoshi was present. Qing looked between them and asked who they were. The blonde man asked if he was Luoshi's friend. The woman added that they had important matters to discuss. The man in the striped suit asked politely for help in reaching him. Luoshi smiled slightly. He hadn't expected them to show up this quickly. These were the heavyweights who had also been pulled into the day of confinement. Qing asked why they were looking for Luoshi. Just from how they carried themselves and how they were dressed, he could tell these were not ordinary people. He figured they were here because Luoshi was now sitting at number 1 in the world, and people like this don't ignore a name at the top of any list. Then his brain shifted gears and he started doing math. He wondered how much 100 years of hospital fees would even cost and why they had paid for him too when he wasn't even a patient. The nurse leaned over and quietly told Luoshi these were the ones who paid. Luoshi thanked her and said he already knew. She looked at him like he'd said something impossible. He then turned to the 3 of them and confirmed he was the person they were looking for. The blonde man studied him for a moment. Even under direct pressure, this young man hadn't so much as blinked. Exactly what you'd expect from the world's number 1 player, though he genuinely hadn't expected him to be this young. Luoshi already knew who they were. These were people whose influence reached across both politics and business. The blonde man was Zhao Ming, head of a national group and a rising force in the political world. The man in the striped suit was Ding Yiyun, CEO of a global tech group with deep ties to the military. The green-haired woman was Zhang Shilin, leader of a massive international conglomerate with energy and resource control spanning multiple countries. Ming said he had heard a great deal about Luoshi. Yiyun said it was a pleasure to finally meet him. Shilin, assuming Luoshi wouldn't know them, moved to introduce herself and the others. But Luoshi told them he already knew who they were, so they could skip the introductions and get straight to the point. That landed on all three of them at once. It only confirmed what they were already suspecting. This was no ordinary person, exactly what you'd expect from the one sitting at the top of the world leaderboard. Shilin found herself even more intrigued than before. She suggested they move to the proper location they had already arranged for the discussion. Luoshi declined without hesitation. He said there was no need to go that far, the doctor's office right here would do just fine. The three exchanged a quick glance, then they agreed and followed him. Shilin noted it quietly to herself. This was not someone who would willingly hand over control of any situation. Meanwhile, Qing and the nurse stood in the hallway completely at a loss. Qing's brain was struggling to catch up. 10 minutes ago, Luoshi had been a patient who couldn't pay his hospital bill, and now 3 of the most powerful people around were falling in line behind him. Luoshi turned back and told Qing to grab the strategy guide he had given him earlier and come along. Qing was stunned to realize he was being included and immediately started questioning whether he was even supposed to be in a room like that. He asked with genuine uncertainty whether he really needed to bring the guide. Something in the way he said it made Luoshi suspicious. Qing shifted uncomfortably and admitted he thought Luoshi was joking when he gave it to him, so he had thrown it in the trash downstairs. He immediately bolted to go fish it back out. Luoshi stood there, quietly annoyed. That explained everything, why neither Qing nor his mother had gained any benefit from the novice dungeon. He made a silent mental note that this idiot owed him 2 clean punches when this was all over. Shilin looked over and asked about the strategy guide he had just mentioned. Luoshi confirmed it, a complete clearing guide covering all novice dungeons in the day of confinement. They looked at him like he had just said something absurd. The game had just descended. How could he possibly have written a guide? They asked him not to joke about something this serious. He told them simply whether it was real or not, they would know the moment Qing came back with it. Outside the room, 4 guards had taken up positions at the door. The doctor who normally used the office had received a call from the hospital director telling him to clear out, which left him standing in the hallway wondering what kind of people were in his own office. Ming read through the notebook in silence. Then he read it again. It was real. Every dungeon he had personally experienced was documented in detail, monster types, weaknesses, and hidden rules all laid out with precise clarity. Shilin found her own dungeon recorded inside it, so did Yi Yun. Qing leaned in close and whispered in Luoshi's ear, was everything in there actually true? Luoshi replied quietly that if he had just listened the first time, he would already have a spot on the world leaderboard right now. Qing looked like he was about to cry. The 3 of them admitted it outright. They had originally come planning to recruit him, but standing here now, it was obvious his capabilities were on a completely different level from anything they had imagined. They weren't in a position to recruit him. They understood that now. Luoshi asked them what they were actually trying to say. Shilin said it plainly. He was like a prophet, someone who could see everything before it happened. Luoshi considered that for a moment and agreed. It did feel a bit like that. In his previous life, survivors had banded together just to stay alive, sharing dungeon records on whatever forums still worked, desperately searching for ways to clear stages. He had forced himself to memorize every rule, every pattern, every hidden condition, because forgetting even one could mean death. He hadn't expected that the knowledge he had ground out across a lifetime of survival would become one of his most powerful weapons the second time around. Now it was a bargaining chip, and he intended to use every bit of it. He asked them what they wanted from him. The 3 looked at each other. A silent agreement passed between them. They bowed. Politely but sincerely, they asked him to serve as their consultant for the day of confinement. Ming admitted it openly. The feeling of being on the razor's edge of death had been genuinely terrifying. With Luoshi's guidance, the next time wouldn't be like that. They knew they would be pulled back in again, and they had no intention of dying. Yi Yun watched Luoshi's face carefully, reading every micro-expression he could find. They continued whatever conditions he set, they would accept all of them without exception. Luoshi replied with quiet confidence that becoming their consultant was not out of the question. In Qing's eyes, that single line made him look impossibly cool. Qing knew Luoshi's family situation better than anyone. They had been struggling financially for years. The most urgent need right now was money, plain and simple. This meant Auntie wouldn't have to grind herself to the bone anymore. It meant Luoshi could stop working himself to exhaustion every day. Qing was already planning to spend more time with him once things settled down. Luoshi told the 3 of them if they wanted his help, they would need to agree to 3 conditions. Qing's chest swelled with pride the moment he heard that. 1 request had become 3. He decided in that instant that this was a man who truly understood how to play the game. The 3 replied without flinching. Even if it were 30 conditions or 300, they would agree to every single one. He could speak freely. Qing suddenly turned pale. He was starting to suspect that Luoshi might actually be asking for too little. Luoshi laid out the first condition. They were to distribute the Novice Dungeon Strategy Guide, print it, post it online, whatever method worked best. He just needed it to reach people. They couldn't believe he was willing to share something this valuable with the general public. Yun pointed out that the commercial value of that guide alone would exceed anything Luoshi could probably imagine. Shilin agreed the game was lethal, and no rational person would gamble their life without preparation. Luoshi reminded them simply that he had just shown it to them for free. That landed. They understood immediately what kind of person they were dealing with. He clarified his intent. This wasn't about saving a few. He wanted to save as many people as possible. And if they couldn't get on board with the first condition, there was nothing left to discuss. Silence fell over the three of them as they thought it through. Ming could tell he wasn't posturing. Yun noticed that Luoshi hadn't hesitated for even a second, and deep inside Shilin felt something she hadn't expected: genuine admiration. He was calm, clear-headed, and quietly kind. In a world being torn apart, that was a rare combination. They agreed to the first condition and promised to get it distributed globally as fast as humanly possible. Luoshi moved to the second condition. He wanted them to establish a player administration bureau and draft player management laws, a framework specifically designed to keep players with supernatural abilities from destabilizing society and trampling ordinary people. They assured him immediately that they were already aligned on this. They had no intention of allowing powered individuals to run loose and bully civilians. Luoshi moved to the final condition. All three of them tensed up when they saw him pause before speaking. They braced themselves. If the first two conditions were already this far-reaching, the third one could be something truly enormous, something far beyond what they could easily deliver. Jing, standing quietly to the side, was internally screaming at Luoshi to just ask for more money. Luoshi said he wanted a house. Nothing lavish, he just didn't want to keep living in a psychiatric hospital with his mother. He wanted her to be able to live a normal life. All three of them stared at him. Even Qing looked quietly let down. That was it. That was the final condition. Luoshi figured they might find it strange. Asking for something so personal felt uncomfortable to him, and the last thing he wanted was to come across as someone with his hand out. But before he could say another word, they were already falling over themselves to agree. In fact, they were excited. The three of them immediately began the quiet, competitive mental calculus of who would be the one to provide it. Luoshi told them not to get carried away. They reined themselves in. But internally, all three of them were thinking the exact same thing. This was by far the easiest of the three conditions to fulfill, and it was also the single best opportunity to build genuine goodwill with him. The silent competition had officially begun. With all three conditions on the table, Luoshi told them he was heading out first. He expected someone would be arriving soon. He informed them that the countdown to the next opening of the day of confinement was about to appear. The room went silent. Every face in it shifted. Right on cue, the system notification appeared: the countdown for the next round of the game. Only players who had survived the novice dungeon could see it. 72 hours remaining. Luoshi told them once they had taken care of his conditions, he would write the strategy for every dungeon in the second round. But they needed to move fast. 3 days was not as long as it sounded. All three answered at once and bowed. Then someone knocked on the door. A guard stepped inside and reported that someone had arrived to see them. Yi Yun's expression darkened. He had given clear orders: no interruptions, regardless of who showed up. The guard flinched and explained that it was Luoshi's girlfriend. The entire room went still. Qing spun toward Luoshi with genuine betrayal in his eyes, demanding to know why he had been dating someone behind his back. Luoshi grabbed Qing's face and told him flatly to be quiet before he started a misunderstanding. He also clarified he was not dating anyone. A young woman walked in holding a bouquet of flowers. The guard attempted to block her, but she slipped past. Qing stared at her like she had personally offended him. The three big shots observed quietly. Shilin noted privately that the two of them did look like they matched, at least on the surface. But Luoshi's expression said something else entirely. He did not look happy to see her. He remembered the moment clearly, her standing with another man, telling him to get lost, telling him that someone like him, a mental patient, had no right to have feelings for anyone. Back in school, people had assumed he liked her, but the truth was he had only ever seen her as a friend, and now she was also a player. She walked up and offered him the bouquet, then apologized for what had happened between them. The three big shots noticed immediately that Luoshi's body language had not shifted an inch in a welcoming direction. They were already reading the room and preparing to step in. But Qing beat them all to it. He stepped directly in front of her and blocked her path, telling her to back off. He asked her what right she had to even be standing there after publicly humiliating Luoshi the way she had. She flustered, trying to explain that she had been young and naive back then and that she knew she had been wrong. But Luoshi already knew exactly why she was standing in this room. She had seen the leaderboard. Shilin's expression tightened the moment she heard that. She understood the calculation immediately. The woman admitted it was true, but she added that even if she had rejected him before, she believed he wouldn't just leave her to die. That only made Qing angrier. He told her that what she had done wasn't a rejection, it was closer to slander, and told her to choose her words more carefully. Luoshi tapped Qing's shoulder and told him to lower his voice. They were in a hospital. Then he told everyone they were leaving. Before walking out, he turned back and told her directly he had only ever seen her as a friend. He had never liked her that way. She insisted he was just being stubborn. She said that if he helped her, she would become his girlfriend. She followed him into the hallway, calling out that she would never leave. A guard stepped in and blocked her path. She stopped stunned. She demanded they move and insisted she was his girlfriend. Ming said it clearly, he didn't want anything to do with her. Shilin added that she shouldn't flatter herself since he had already stated she was never his girlfriend. They instructed the guards to escort her out. She was still screaming for them to let go as they walked her away. Qing caught up to Luoshi and told him he was unbelievably cool. They made their way toward the ward. Because Luoshi already knew someone would be waiting inside, he pushed the door open. A silver-haired woman turned to face him. His mother said that Yuru had come to visit him again. The silver-haired woman, Xiao Yuru, smiled and said that since Auntie had told her he stepped out, she had helped tidy up a few things while she waited. Luoshi smiled and said it had been a long time since they last saw each other. That confused her. She had only visited last week. But in his previous life, the image he carried of her was completely different. She had been lying in a pool of blood, and her last words to him were to keep living. In this life, he made himself a promise he would not let any important person be taken from him again. He stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. Her face went red immediately. Qing stood nearby, watching the two of them, quietly deciding that they did not look like just friends. That night, the hospital moved both Luoshi and his mother to a significantly better ward without being asked. It was a quiet demonstration of just how much reach Ming and the others had. The countdown on his screen showed 63 hours remaining. He expected the next dungeon to play out the same way it had in his previous life. After the class change, he had gained the skill Resonance of Tools. And ever since, every object he touched felt different in a way that was difficult to explain. Take the hospital bed, for example. The moment he activated the ability, it was like running a complete diagnostic of the object in his mind. His understanding of that single hospital bed became surprisingly deep. He could even pinpoint that the second screw on the left leg of the frame was close to working itself loose. Unfortunately, there were no real weapons anywhere in the hospital. Otherwise, he would have loved to push this skill and see exactly how far it could go. Then a voice broke the quiet. It told him that he had the qualifications to participate in the God's trial. He recognized it instantly, the same voice that had appeared inside his head countless times since he was born, the one everyone around him had always called an auditory hallucination. He asked who it was and what this qualification actually meant. The voice replied that he would understand who it was in time. For now, the choice was his whether or not to undergo the God's trial. Luoshi understood what this meant. This voice held power that could help him stand against the evil gods. And this was not an opportunity he could afford to pass up. He accepted the trial without hesitation. The entity seemed pleased with that answer. The trial began. It warned him if he passed, he would return. If he failed, he would remain trapped in the trial space forever. Luoshi felt himself being pulled through space. He had never encountered power that felt this sacred and otherworldly. Passing was not optional, it was the only way out. He found himself wondering what the reward would be on the other side. The trial space finished forming. He landed on solid ground. He looked around slowly. What he saw was a palace, and it made no sense to him. The entity that had called him here appeared. Its form was obscured by mist, but the massive frame and spread of wings were visible through the haze. It told him the trial was straightforward, defeat his opponent within 10 minutes and he could leave. It left him with one more thing, the wisdom to perceive everything was the only path to victory. The trial began. The eyeless Oathkeeper appeared, the strongest swordsman who could never be harmed. The 10-minute timer started counting down. Luoshi studied his opponent carefully. From the front, a tall figure in gleaming silver armor trimmed with gold, a large blue cape, long blonde hair, and a blindfold across his eyes. He held an enormous sword with an almost bored stillness, but from behind, the image was disturbing. A skeleton was fused directly into his back, like a corpse bonded to his body. The strongest player standing across from the strongest swordsman. He was given a weapon for the fight. It felt like the universe's way of answering his earlier frustration about having nothing to test his resonance of tools on. But the system flagged it immediately. This was not a real weapon, so resonance could not occur. That told him what he needed to know. Resonance of tools only worked on genuine objects. The sword was an illusion, a prop. Since that was settled, there was no point dragging this out. He would end the trial in one clean run. He was curious what the strongest swordsman was actually capable of. The swordsman Cao didn't make him wait long, he charged. When Liuoshi blocked the strike, he could feel immediately that the man's raw power was substantial. The swordsman pulled back and shifted his stance. The speed and force of movement, all while carrying a greatsword, was genuinely surprising even to Liuoshi. Then he saw the stance shift into a finishing move. A wide arc of glowing energy followed the slash as the blade met the ground, shattering the floor and sending debris in every direction. Fast and devastatingly heavy, Liuoshi launched himself upward to avoid the worst of it. And from that vantage point in the air with the dust still settling, he saw it. A clear opening, one that could decide the entire fight. He also registered that his opponent was an illusion, just like the sword, which meant cutting him down carried no moral weight whatsoever. His strike came down and nearly took the head clean off. By any reasonable measure, a wound like that should have ended it, but it regenerated. That was why he was called the strongest swordsman who could never be harmed. This man simply could not be killed, not through conventional means. Liuoshi stepped back and started thinking differently. Beheading wasn't the answer, so what was? He recalled what the entity had said before the trial started. The wisdom to perceive everything was the only path to victory. That wasn't decoration, it was a hint, and he knew it. His eyes drifted to the skeleton fused into the knight's back. He tried attacking it, and the knight's entire body reacted to defend it. Everything clicked: the blindfold, the oath, the skeleton. This man called himself the Eyeless Oathkeeper because his oath was to protect the person behind him. And now he knew exactly how to win. The entity watched from the mist and judged quietly. Liuoshi had not yet demonstrated the qualification. No form of swordsmanship could kill the Eyeless Oathkeeper. No direct attack would ever be enough. 2 minutes and 19 seconds left on the clock. Liuoshi made his move. He struck the Eyeless Oathkeeper and pulled the blindfold from his eyes. The entity watching leaned forward, visibly surprised, instead of going for the head. Liuoshi told the Eyeless Oathkeeper to open his eyes and look at the one he had sworn to protect, because what was behind him was already nothing but a skeleton. The Eyeless Oathkeeper turned and looked, and froze. The moment the truth registered, his oath already broken, his purpose already hollow, he fell into despair. He began to dissolve. 51 seconds remained on the timer. Liuoshi spoke quietly. The answer had been inside the riddle the whole time. The Oathkeeper who could never be killed would only unravel the moment he saw that his oath had already failed. The weapon given at the start of the trial had always been a red herring designed to point him in the wrong direction. He addressed the figure hidden in the mist and asked if he had understood correctly. The entity stepped forward and revealed itself. It confirmed that he was right. The simpler the answer, the harder it was to see, but Liuoshi had seen through it. Having determined that Liuoshi carried the qualifications it was looking for, the entity decided to grant him a blessing. Liuoshi felt a flicker of genuine curiosity about what kind of power he was about to receive. A brilliant light surrounded him completely. The entity told him plainly this was the true trial. He had better endure it. Liuoshi asked what it meant. Was there another trial beyond this one? The entity explained to accept the blessing, he would have to withstand the source of divine power directly. He would feel the full mental impact of every living being simultaneously, their pain, their joy, their rage, their sorrow. The prayers of billions all at once. And Liuoshi felt himself falling. Everything turned red and unsettling. Piercing, terrifying screams echoed around him from every direction. Mask-like faces materialized in the darkness, staring at him from all sides. Then the visions came. He began to see fragments of real lives, different people, different experiences, flashing past him in rapid succession. And in that torrent, he understood divine power was built from the faith of every living being on earth. The weight of it was overwhelming, and somehow it made him smile. With strength like this behind him, he couldn't help but laugh. He was going to use Earth's own gods to fight back against the invaders who had treated their world like entertainment. The entity observed as Liuoshi faced the final and most extreme shock, something no human mind should have been able to endure. It wasn't certain whether Liuoshi had already broken under it. It saw him, still standing. The entity found this genuinely remarkable, exactly as expected from the one they had selected. Liuoshi had received the god's blessing, and he should remember the name of the one who granted it. Furthermore, once he earned the approval of the others, the true ultimate blessing would descend upon him. Liuoshi had so many questions. But the entity disappeared before he could ask a single one. He hadn't even caught the name. He jolted awake in his hospital bed. His first thought, what kind of blessing had he actually received? The answer appeared on the system screen. A special blessing had been granted mental guardian, permanent immunity to all mental type abilities, granted by the Seraph Gabriel, the name he hadn't caught now he had it. And he suspected strongly that this was the same unidentifiable blessing he had seen on his panel from the very beginning. Immunity to mental type abilities was extraordinarily valuable, especially in a game that weaponized the mind at every turn. But now his mind was on something else. Gabriel had mentioned other gods and an ultimate blessing that still awaited him. He hadn't expected that the mental illness that had defined his entire life was actually something far greater, a group of Earth's own gods present within him all along. In the end, the power to save the world had been living inside his so-called illness this whole time. Jing was checking the countdown on his phone and stopped mid-breath. Stunned to see there was now a video version of it, he immediately got too loud about it. Luoshi smacked him on the head and reminded him they were in a hospital. Jing excitedly pulled up the dungeon simulation video that had been produced and shoved it in his face. The production quality was genuinely impressive. Luoshi's mother watched the two of them bicker and felt quietly glad that their friendship was still exactly what it had always been. Luoshi watched the video and had to admit Ming and his team were efficient. In under 2 days, promotional videos for the initial dungeon were already circulating all over the internet. On top of that, they had already coordinated with government officials and formally established the Player Management Special Action Bureau. The World Player Leaderboard was being displayed publicly as well. Luoshi watched it scroll and wondered, would the storm he had set in motion give those naturally gifted players the runway they needed to rise? The nurse appeared and told Luoshi to look outside. There was a convoy parked at the entrance and they were saying they were there to pick him up. Jing rushed to the window to see for himself. His eyes went wide. It was absolutely a convoy. All 3 big shots were present. Several guards stood in formation around them and a line of vehicles trailed behind the lead limousine. Shilin spotted Jing at the window and asked him to tell Luoshi they had come to take him to see his new residence. Jing turned around looking personally victorious. They had actually brought a convoy for them. Luoshi said he already knew and told everyone to head down. Internally, he couldn't help but wonder, was this just how wealthy people operated? His mother's face tightened with worry. She told him not to get involved in anything illegal. Jing looked genuinely confused by that. Luoshi assured her they hadn't done anything wrong. He told her simply that he was in the process of saving the world right now. That somehow made his mother more confused, and the nurse quietly wondered if he was still speaking nonsense. But Luoshi knew sooner or later they would all understand. The first property was a villa that Ming had personally selected. Mountains on one side, clear water on the other, a garden in the back, fully organic and freshly sourced food. 16 bodyguards and 8 nannies operating around the clock. On paper, a perfectly comfortable setup for both him and his mother. Luoshi took one look, turned around and walked back out. He told them to check the next one. Jing looked stunned. Ming muttered that it was a shame he genuinely couldn't figure out Luoshi's taste. Yi Yun and Shilin were waiting in the car. Since Ming's option had been turned down, it was now Yi Yun's turn. Shilin saw it as her opening. Yi Yun was confident in what he had prepared. He was certain this one would land. His reasoning, a talent like Luoshi deserved a view of the entire city, Kingshan from above in every direction. Jing's eyes lit up the moment he saw it, an entire city visible from one window. Yi Yun told them the apartment was located in the most central district of Kingshan City, a landmark building designed by a world-renowned architect. And this unit was the crown jewel of the entire tower. He had also prepared something extra for Luoshi. Jing leaned forward with visible interest. Yi Yun called out for them to come in. 10 nannies he had personally selected, all young, all professionally presented. Jing's composure evaporated instantly. They surrounded Luoshi. Ming and Shilin both stared. Neither of them had thought of this. Yi Yun stood there absolutely certain that no man alive could walk away from an offer like this. Luoshi left to look at the next property. Yi Yun could not believe what he had just witnessed. It only confirmed what he already suspected. Luoshi operated on a completely different frequency from other people. Ming held onto a quiet hope that he might still have a chance. Shilin led him to the property she had chosen. It wasn't the most lavish of the 3, but she had a feeling he would respond to it differently. She had done her research. She had learned about him and his mother, their history, what they had been through. And she believed that this house would feel familiar to him. Luoshi stopped when he saw it. He said it felt both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Jing recognized it immediately. It was Luoshi's childhood home, the one that had been sold years ago to cover his treatment costs. Ming and Yi Yun exchanged a glance. They both knew they had already lost. Shilin explained that the property had changed hands several times since then, so the layout wasn't perfectly preserved. But she had done her best to restore it as faithfully as possible and make it genuinely comfortable. Liuoshi walked through it quietly. The room arrangement was close enough to what he remembered from childhood. He told her he would take it and thanked her. She said there was no need for thanks, it was her honor. The two men stood to the side, quietly accepting their defeat. They hadn't seen that coming. Liuoshi then told Qing to bring it out. Jilin asked what it was. Qing handed it over, the complete set of strategy guides for all second-round dungeons that Liuoshi had written over the past several days. Only players who had cleared the novice dungeon would encounter these stages. Shilin stared at it and then at Qing's waistband where it had clearly been stuffed. She could not believe something this valuable had been transported like that. They asked whether this one should also be distributed to everyone. Liuoshi said no, not this time. They should identify individuals with genuine potential and pass it to them selectively. The day of confinement demanded that players grow through their own understanding and effort. For anyone who had only made it through the novice dungeon by sheer luck, even with the guide in hand, they wouldn't get very far. What he wanted was to identify players worth investing in, help rookies understand the basic rules. That was enough for the wider population. The ones who were truly capable would rise regardless. They understood his reasoning. Shilin then asked, why did he want to gather these exceptional players in the first place? Liuoshi answered simply, he needed them to save the world alongside him. The room went quiet for a moment, then it sank in. He had a goal that dwarfed everything else they had been thinking about. 2 hours and 69 minutes remained before the next round began. Wait, that math didn't quite add up, but the clock was moving regardless. Qing announced proudly that he was fully prepared, patting the enormous backpack strapped to his back. He had packed a mountain of supplies. Liuoshi hugged his mother and told her he would be back soon. She asked where they were going. Qing, with all the energy of someone who had never once been subtle, announced that they were going on an adventure to another world. The countdown ended and the selected players were pulled in. Qing said his goodbyes to Mrs. Luo. Liuoshi had already decided Qing was capable enough to clear his own dungeon. He didn't plan to step in and carry him. Qing told him to watch, he was going to make the leaderboard. And then they were gone. Just like in his previous life, the second dungeon was Extreme Cold Apartment. A D-rank dungeon, the players entering this one were no longer rookies. The objective was to locate the boss and defeat it to clear the stage. There was a 5-minute countdown before the doors opened, and just like before, the system issued deliberately misleading hints. It was never as straightforward as simply finding the boss. To clear this dungeon, he needed a completely reliable teammate. Because the true clearing condition was to partner up with someone trustworthy, draw out 2 bosses simultaneously, one from the top floor, one from the bottom, bring them both to the middle floor and make them meet. Only then would the dungeon register as cleared. The memory of being betrayed by someone in this same dungeon during his previous life was still fresh enough to sting. But this time, he was looking forward to finding the person he trusted most. The special permanent card Team Formation activated. It summoned Rui. She looked around, visibly startled to see him. She asked what he was doing there and then asked where she even was. Liuoshi told her that he was the one who had brought her into his dungeon. If he was remembering correctly, she should have just been on a small island when a series of prompts appeared in front of her. In his previous life, Rui had become a player the second time the game descended. Her first novice dungeon had been an island survival type. That island dungeon had left her with deep psychological trauma that stayed with her for a long time. Pulling her into his dungeon instead was the whole point. He was not going to let her go through that again. She asked how he could possibly have known she was on a small island. Then the prompts appeared in front of her and she stopped. She had been welcomed into the D-rank dungeon, Extreme Cold Apartment. She thought for a moment she had seen something about this game in a video while scrolling online. She tried to recall the name. Liuoshi told her Day of Confinement. He said that he needed someone completely reliable at his side, so he chose her. 2.5 minutes remained before the doors opened and the monsters came. He asked if she would be his partner and extended his hand toward her. The gesture pulled something up from her memory, a moment from when they were children. He had reached out his hand to her once before, asking her to come play with him. Back then she had hesitated, but she had taken it. This time she didn't hesitate at all. With 22 seconds left on the clock, he asked if she had retained everything he had told her. She said she had memorized it all. Monsters could appear anywhere without warning. She was not to touch anything carelessly. And this was not actually an apartment, it was a maze split across upper and lower levels. The way to clear it was to bring the bosses from both floors to the middle and make them meet. He told her he was opening the door. Rui steadied herself. She was going to be a teammate he could actually count on. The door opened to an icy room. Rui felt it immediately, even colder inside than she had expected. Liuoshi told her the cold would ease up once they got their hands on some attribute cards. He already knew where the monsters were, so he was heading straight there. A figure emerged from the far end of the alley. Luoshi's expression shifted. The man who had betrayed him in his previous life standing right there looking exactly the same. The man muttered about how freezing it was and flinched at the thought of a monster jumping out at him from somewhere. And he spotted Luoshi and Rui, and his body visibly relaxed. Beat later he registered they were players too. Luoshi already knew exactly what was coming. The man would extend an invitation to team up. He had the look of someone responsible and dependable, the type that people instinctively trusted. In reality, he was a coward who hid behind his teammates and turned on them the moment it was convenient. In his previous life, he had made his approach the same way, friendly, calm, easy to like. He had worked to earn Luoshi's trust over time. But in every fight that actually mattered, he had stayed safely behind Luoshi and let him absorb everything. And that was only the surface of it. When Luoshi had pushed himself to his absolute limit to take down a floor boss, the man had driven a blade into his back without a second's hesitation, left him bleeding on the floor, and walked away with the attribute cards. Luoshi had nearly died because of that. Someone had reached out and pulled him back from the edge. Back to the present, the man smiled and suggested they team up. Watching each other's backs would make dealing with the monsters much easier. But what sat behind that smile was something else entirely. He had already set his sights on Rui, and he was waiting for the right moment to eliminate Luoshi and take her. He had also clocked the blue vein sword, a much better weapon than the dagger he was carrying. He pushed the invitation, urging Luoshi to join forces with him. Luoshi looked at him for a moment. Then, since this man had once put a blade in his back, he returned the sentiment. The man went rigid with shock. Just as the man had done to him in the past, Luoshi left him there to manage on his own. He turned to Rui and asked if she had any questions. She said no, she trusted that he had his reasons. He moved on to track down attribute cards for her. A figure emerged further down the corridor, walking toward the man Luoshi had just left behind. The figure confirmed quietly to himself the description matched the person he had been given information about. He wondered whether someone who had freely distributed the Novice Dungeon Strategy Guide to the public would really harm others without cause. Liu Mao decided that Luoshi was someone worth watching closely. He was currently sitting at 34th place on the leaderboard. Inside one of the rooms, a monster hung suspended from the ceiling. Luoshi kicked the door open. There it was, exactly where he expected. The hanging cold spirit, level 5. Level 5 strength, level 6 agility, level 2 stamina, level 1 mana. It launched toward them. Rui's breath caught in her throat. It moved fast, filling the air with unsettling, distorted monster sounds. Luoshi fixed it with a flat stare and told it to shut up. It was being too loud, then he just slapped it. It went flying into a pile of objects across the room. And just like that, it was done. They obtained E-rank attribute cards capable of increasing stamina below level 10. Rui looked at him and asked, was that seriously how he always dealt with monsters? He told her not to read too much into it. That particular one was exceptionally weak. Plenty of monsters in this dungeon were a completely different story. Rui's eyes lit up at that. Being a horror fan, the idea of monsters that could actually push him to his limits was somehow more exciting than terrifying to her. He handed her the card and explained, hold it, think about using it, and her player attributes would activate. She gave him a skeptical look. An ordinary apartment with monsters lurking around, it still didn't quite feel real. But the moment she used the card, the effect was immediate and undeniable. Her stamina rose to level 1. He told her she picked that up fast. Then they moved on, more cards to find. With her stamina active, the biting cold that had been gnawing at her started to ease up. She looked over at him and asked how he knew so much about this game already. Did he just really like playing it? That question made him stop walking. His expression shifted, something darker crossing his face. She immediately asked if she had said something wrong. He told her plainly this game wasn't fun, not even a little. He reminded her that their only reason for playing it was to destroy it. She didn't fully understand, but she trusted that he meant every word. Without warning, something burst out from the wall. He grabbed it by the throat before it could close the distance and crushed it in his hand. No attribute card dropped. Disappointing but not surprising, drops in this dungeon were completely random. That was one of its more frustrating design choices. But floor bosses were guaranteed to drop cards. That was his next target. Meanwhile, the other players were having a rough time. The apartment was a sprawling maze and most of them couldn't find their way out of a single corridor. Rui noticed the difference immediately. Those players were wandering blind, yet Luoshi moved through this place like he had a map burned into his brain. She found herself quietly impressed. As they walked, he gave her a quick breakdown. The early stretch of the extreme cold apartment wasn't the dangerous part. The temperature dropped by 1 degree every 5 minutes. Starting at 6 degrees Celsius, it would take a full 30 minutes just to dip below zero. But there was no lower limit. Given enough time, even players with maxed out attributes wouldn't survive the cold, and if the floor boss of each level wasn't defeated, the door to the next floor stayed sealed permanently. The end result for anyone who couldn't clear it in time? Frozen to death. Yeah, lovely design on this one. He continued, the higher or lower the floor from the center, the faster the temperature plummeted, but he still remembered exactly where each floor boss was. Every location burned into memory. Mao had been following at a distance and watching closely. He noted that every step Liuoshi took had a deliberate purpose, nothing wasted. The system had given Mao almost nothing to work with in terms of hints, and he still hadn't figured out how to locate the floor exits. He found himself wondering whether Liuoshi had some method he wasn't showing. It crossed his mind, someone capable of writing that many novice dungeon strategy guides might have an ability that went well beyond ordinary knowledge. He hoped the world's #1 player would live up to that expectation. Deeper inside the maze, the initial floor boss was lurking somewhere nearby. It was good at staying hidden, which meant the most reliable way to draw it out was to make noise. But before he could act on that, someone stepped out and spotted him. A punk-looking guy, he pointed and asked if he was Liuoshi. Rui turned and asked if Liuoshi knew him. He didn't recognize the face. They kept walking. That was apparently the wrong move because the man immediately started shouting, telling them not to look down on him. He announced he was also on the leaderboard. Mao perked up from a distance. He wondered what rank. Liuoshi said he didn't bother remembering anyone outside the top 10. He asked the man directly what was his rank. The red-haired man looked like he'd been personally insulted. He puffed up and declared rank 783, and after this dungeon he was going to be #1. He introduced himself as Zhang Qi and made it very clear they should call him Qi Shao. Liuoshi and Rui were unmoved. Even Mao, watching from a distance, didn't feel the situation was worth reacting to. Liuoshi asked what this 783 wanted. That sent Qi Shao over the edge. He told them to stop calling him that and use his actual name. Then he declared he had come to defeat Liuoshi and take the top spot. He wanted the whole world to know that first place had only been luck. Liuoshi just slapped him. Qi Shao hit the floor. Liuoshi told 783 to stay in the corner. He had things to do. Qi Shao scrambled to his feet, pulled out his dagger, and told his crew to draw their weapons. Apparently, looting Liuoshi's gear was the plan. He swore he would slap Liuoshi 100 times. Liuoshi sized them up quickly. Idiots, not genuinely dangerous. A lesson would do more good than a beating. He kicked open a nearby door and picked up a wooden stick from inside. That was his weapon of choice for this one. He was going to teach them properly, no sword needed. The timing also worked in his favor. He needed to make noise to lure out the floor boss anyway. 2 problems, 1 solution. On top of that, this was a perfect chance to test his class skill. He activated Resonance of Tools on the wooden stick. It worked. The system returned its assessment immediately. Weapon rating, E useless trash. Resonance level, 99. 9. With continued use, the resonance level would increase. A level 1 strength buff had also been applied. On top of that, he now understood something new. The skill could automatically evaluate any weapon it was used on. That was going to be incredibly useful whenever he encountered unidentified items down the road. Qi Shao sneered and called him an arrogant brat for not pulling out his actual sword. He declared it would be his biggest mistake. Liuoshi just looked at them. Qi Shao called his crew forward. They hesitated. None of them moved. That made Qi Shao furious. He called them useless and shoved them toward Liuoshi. They were scared. Some of them were quietly questioning whether their boss had any idea who he was provoking. This was the #1 player in the entire world. But Qi Shao was too deep in his own emotions to care. The disrespect had gotten to him and rational thinking had officially left the building. He charged at Liuoshi without hesitation, declaring that first place was just a title and he was going to knock it right off him. Since he needed to make noise anyway, Liuoshi decided to make it count. He would respond in the most memorable way possible. He slapped Qi Shao and told him that was possibly the most thoughtless charge he had ever witnessed. Qi Shao burst into tears and screamed at the top of his lungs. Good, that would do it. The floor boss had definitely heard that. A vine shot out from the darkness. It coiled around Qi Shao, then sealed his mouth as it began dragging him away. His crew stood frozen, watching, then scrambled after him in a panic. Liuoshi turned to Rui and explained quickly that was the floor boss. The only way to open the path to the next level was to kill it. He told her to follow him, but there was no need to rush. She was shocked anyway by how fast he was already moving. She connected the dots. This was what player attributes actually did to a person. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would feel like to move like that. She had always loved thriller and superhero movies, and apparently she had stumbled directly into one. Mao watched from a distance, quietly putting the pieces together. Liuoshi had come here specifically to hunt the floor boss. Every move up to this point had been building toward that. He started calculating. If he could find a way to fight alongside someone like this, their odds of clearing the dungeon would go through the roof. He was willing to pay whatever it cost to get that chance. Ji Xiao's crew started shouting at the monster, demanding it let their boss go. They were furious and kept throwing threats at it like that was going to do anything. One of them worked up the courage and jumped at it. The monster sent them all flying one after another, clean shots to the chest. This was the man-eating flower level 8 E+ rank floor boss. Level 9 strength, level 7 agility, level 5 stamina, not something you charged at with your fists. Ji Xiao got a very close look at its rows of serrated teeth and started hoping very loudly in his head that someone would show up and save him. Then he saw Luoshi approaching. Some of the tension left his body. The world's #1 player, okay, maybe this was fine, but then the doubt crept back in. After everything he had just pulled, would Luoshi actually help him? Luoshi came in fast. The sword swung, the monster let out a shriek of pain. Ji Xiao felt the wave of relief hit him all at once. And immediately after that, somehow felt even worse than if Luoshi had just left him there. Luoshi told him to get off the ground. He pointed out that since Ji Xiao had made it onto the leaderboard, he should be winning properly, not getting hauled around by a plant. And when he actually broke into the top 10, Luoshi would fight him for real. Ji Xiao stared at him, completely disarmed. He thanked Luoshi and for the first time meant every word. He promised he would make it into the top 10, just as it had in his previous life. Defeating the floor boss opened the path downward, but with it came a choice, 2 options, 2 directions. Up to face the mutated apartment creatures, or down to face the terrifying, extreme cold, dead entities. Rui finally caught up with him. The system gave Luoshi 4 minutes to decide. She looked at both options and asked which one he was picking. Ji Xiao looked between them, visibly uneasy. Both choices sounded genuinely awful. Rui, on the other hand, was running the internal math of a person who had spent way too many hours watching horror movies. Monsters above, ghosts below. She wanted both. She fought very hard to keep a neutral expression so Luoshi wouldn't think she had completely lost it. He turned to her and asked which one she wanted. She stared at the 2 options and genuinely struggled. This was an impossible question. Then someone stepped forward and asked Luoshi if he could join them. He introduced himself, Liu Mao, currently ranked 34th. He said he could be useful. Luoshi smiled slightly. Finally. Rank 34 was no small thing, with hundreds of thousands of players in the first wave. That put him in genuinely elite territory. Ji Xiao wasn't impressed. In his mind, 34 wasn't top 10, so it wasn't worth much. He was already planning to leapfrog past that himself. Luoshi had already known Mao was tailing him, had known for a while. He decided it was time to acknowledge it. Because in his previous life, this was the person who had saved him. Mao asked, a little caught off guard, whether Luoshi had noticed him that long ago. In that other life, after the betrayal left him bleeding out on the floor, Luoshi had been certain he was finished. Then Mao had appeared. He pulled him back from the edge, took one look at his potential and said directly they needed someone like him. He told Luoshi to follow his lead and they would make it out alive. He held to that. He gave the orders and Luoshi followed. What came after was brutal and slow, grinding through the dungeon step by agonizing step, but they had cleared it. It had been one of the hardest stretches Luoshi could remember, but in that moment, Mao had been nothing less than a savior to him. And yet, even someone as capable as him had eventually fallen in the day of confinement. That truth had lodged itself somewhere deep in Luoshi's mind. No matter how strong a player became inside the game, to the evil gods they were still just pieces on a board. Mao shifted uncomfortably in the silence. He asked if there was a problem. Ji Xiao assumed there was no way Luoshi would agree to bring someone like Mao along. But Luoshi said yes, he needed someone with Mao's level of strength on his side. Mao expressed his thanks and moved to offer something in return, but Luoshi stopped him. In his previous life, Mao had already more than paid that debt. Now it was Luoshi's turn to settle his side of it. Mao assumed Luoshi was set for attribute cards and didn't need more, but he figured the woman would. Rui's eyes immediately lit up. She had been very quietly imagining what superhuman-level attributes would actually feel like in her body, but she caught herself and looked over at Luoshi first. He told her simply it was her call. That small gesture of respect made her visibly happy. He knew she needed the cards to keep growing. She accepted them without another second of hesitation. Mao said he was genuinely glad she took them. Truth was, meeting Luoshi here had been the kind of luck he hadn't planned for. If they had refused, rebuilding that trust would have been difficult. He was already thinking about what he could offer once they made it back to reality. Luoshi told them it was time to move. The boss on the next floor down was going to be significantly stronger, and they couldn't afford to stand around. Bao and Ri fell in behind him. Ji Xiao watched them go and made a snap decision. There was no way he was going to let that guy with the glasses show him up. He was clearly better than rank 34, and if he asked nicely enough, Liuoshi would definitely let him join. He had a very high opinion of himself, and that opinion told him this was a good idea. He stepped forward and opened his mouth to make his case. He didn't even get to the second word. Liuoshi told him to get lost. The sentence never had a chance. On their way down the stairs, Mao asked Liuoshi if he had a solid read on the dungeon. Liuoshi said the structure was actually straightforward once you understood it. Their starting floor was the 4th. The apartment had 7 floors total, 3 stages in each direction, up or down. Since Liuoshi clearly knew the layout this well, Mao asked directly, did he know the final boss's weakness? Liuoshi answered, the 2 final bosses in this dungeon couldn't be killed by players, not through conventional means. Making them meet each other was the only way to clear the stage. Mao absorbed that, which meant they would need to split, one group going up, one going down, and manage both sides simultaneously. That was exactly why Liuoshi had chosen to tackle the bottom floors first. The plan was to draw out the bottom floor boss and then push it upward in one continuous chase all the way to where the top floor boss waited. Let gravity and momentum do the work. That way the 2 final bosses would collide in the middle, the clearing condition would trigger, and their risk exposure would be as low as possible. Mao said it was exactly the kind of strategy he'd expect from the number 1 player. He also recognized that for any other player trying to lure the final boss, having to fight back through already cleared floor bosses again would be nearly impossible. Then Rui thought it through and realized Liuoshi's original plan had been to do this entire thing himself. 2 bosses, both floors solo, with only her as backup. He confirmed it quietly but added that her safety mattered to him. Attempting that with just the 2 of them would have been reckless, so he had chosen the safer approach instead. That hit her somewhere she wasn't expecting. Then she sneezed. Even with stamina at level 4, strength at level 3, and agility at level 2, the cold was starting to bite through. Liuoshi explained the temperature drop rate on the 2nd floor was double what it was on the starting level. It had already gone below 0. No time to waste. They needed to find the floor boss and move. They came to a room, and inside was a ferocious wolf-like monster flanked by several zombie creatures. Mao was genuinely thrown off. In that enormous maze, Liuoshi had pinpointed the boss's exact location without hesitation. Liuoshi said simply, this was a route memorized through life and death. There was no forgetting something like that. That answer stuck in Mao's head and wouldn't let go. A route memorized through life and death in a game that had only just appeared in the world. That didn't add up. He filed it away and kept moving. Standing before them was the D-rank boss, Dog King Aras, level 10. Level 11 strength, level 11 stamina, level 13 agility. Before charging in, Liuoshi warned them wandering cold spirits would converge on them the moment the fight started. They needed to stay protected. I assured him he had Rui covered. Good enough. With Mao on guard duty, Liuoshi could pour everything into the boss without splitting his attention. He went in. The boss clamped down on his sword with its teeth. At the same moment, the cold spirits surged in. Mao stepped in front of Rui and knocked the spirits back with a clean, precise strike. He was the 9th generation successor of Bagua Hands, a lineage that had made clearing the novice dungeon feel almost easy by comparison. A few wandering cold spirits weren't going to give him trouble. He told Rui to stay behind him and promised to wrap this up quickly. And she started punching monsters too. She was genuinely amazed. The attribute boost actually let her fight at a level she had never reached before, even with all her training. Mao looked over at her and quietly revised his assessment. Just like Liuoshi, this woman was full of surprises. Dog King Aras let out a thunderous roar and lunged. Liuoshi spotted the opening and slashed it repeatedly across the body. Mao was watching and something felt off. Liuoshi had hit the boss clean multiple times, but every single strike had missed the vital points. Intentionally. Why? They needed to kill the floor boss to get through to the next level. And if the temperature kept dropping at this rate, that wasn't going to be optional for much longer. He kept watching, trying to work out what Liuoshi was actually doing. Liuoshi sidestepped as Dog King Aras swiped at him. He was threading a needle, keeping the boss alive right at the edge. Killing it outright would only trigger the bottom floor boss's berserk state and the rewards wouldn't improve. But bringing it to exactly 1% health would activate a hidden storyline. That was the play. He just needed to hold that line with precision. Then Aras reared back and activated Roar of the Wind, a D-rank ability that gathered raw force and released it as a devastating gust capable of shredding everything in its path. Mao saw it winding up and screamed at Liuoshi to find cover immediately. Dog King Aras was wide open, teeth clashing against the air barrier as the impact sent waves of light and concussive force cascading outward in every direction. Liuoshi told them not to worry about him, just get themselves and Rui out of the blast zone. Mao hesitated, taking a boss's ultimate attack head-on. Even he would have come out of that hurt. He had no idea what Liuoshi was trying to accomplish. But he chose to trust it. He had decided to follow this person's lead, and that meant holding to it. He grabbed Rui and pulled her toward the far corner. Dog King Ares compressed the full force of Roar of the Wind into a single concentrated point, a spinning orb of dense energy. The air around it crackled and split as the destructive pressure continued to build. That had been extremely close. Mao was genuinely glad they had moved when they did. But Rui immediately noticed Liuoshi was still in there. Her chest tightened and she moved to go back for him. Mao held her back. Liuoshi had specifically told him to. He told her to stay and trust him. She asked, could he really handle that alone? Then the noise died down. Rui noticed the air outside had gone quiet. She suggested checking. Mao said Liuoshi hadn't called for them yet. They should give it another moment. Right on cue, Liuoshi's voice came through, telling them to come out. Rui exhaled properly for the first time in a while. They hurried over and stopped. Ares was standing at 1% health, exactly where Liuoshi had wanted it. Rui said he was unreal, like something out of a superhero film. Mao admitted out loud that he had genuinely been worried and that this encounter had made him understand just how little he had truly known. Liuoshi was already expecting the hidden side mission to trigger. Mao connected the dots. Liuoshi hadn't been sparing the boss out of mercy. Every deliberate miss, every controlled exchange had been positioning for this exact moment. The hidden mission. Rui, for her part, was just excited that hidden side missions were apparently a thing. Liuoshi crouched down to Ares' level and asked it quietly if it was willing he could take it to see its master. Ares went still, then let out a long, mournful howl. The system notified Liuoshi Ares had sent a team join request. He accepted. Ares has joined the team. Hidden side mission activated. After recruiting both Ares and Little Posy into the team, the whole group will receive a special buff bonus, and the final settlement rewards will increase by 50%. The system also confirmed the kill rewards, a D-rank attribute card granting +2 stamina and +2 strength, usable when the attribute value reaches level 15. Additionally, a D-rank item card, Storage King, upgradable, capable of storing up to 5 cubic meters of items but unable to store anything living. He was genuinely glad to see D-rank attribute cards. His stats were finally in the range where they would actually apply. His strength sat at level 11 while agility, stamina, and mana were all at level 10. The permanent mental guardian buff kept him immune to all mental type abilities. He used the cards immediately. Strength climbed to level 13, stamina to level 12. As for the Storage King, he already knew that one was going to pull its weight eventually. A soft sound caught his attention. A small husky puppy was sitting there looking up at him. He asked Ares was this its true form. Rui immediately melted. She reached out and patted its head, completely unable to reconcile the tiny fluffy creature in front of her with the level 10 floor boss that had nearly taken them apart moments ago. Liuoshi told her that if she didn't believe it, he could have it change back. That froze her solid. Just the memory of that enormous, terrifying form was enough to drain the color from her face. He let her sweat for exactly 1 second before clarifying that he was joking. This was its real form now. She asked a little cautiously whether all the bosses on that level had started out as creatures like this. Mao hadn't noticed it before, but if that was true, then whoever designed this dungeon had some seriously twisted sensibilities. Liuoshi confirmed it and warned them the deeper they went, the more of the game's dark side they would see. In that moment, Rui finally understood what he had meant earlier about the only reason for playing being to destroy it. A passage formed ahead of them, and a sound drifted up from below. A soft meow? Rui wondered out loud whether there was actually a cat down there. Ares immediately started barking with intense, focused aggression. Liuoshi recognized the reaction. That was not a cat, that was the floor boss of the next level, and it had already sensed them. He told them to move. Ares was already impatient to see its old friend. Extreme cold apartment, -2nd floor, current temperature -10 degrees Celsius, temperature drops by 2 degrees per minute in the stage. E-rank and D-rank cold spirits between level 7 and level 9 roamed the area in groups. Mao and Rui took in the scene ahead of them. The monsters had already noticed them. Rui could see immediately that the monster density had gone up significantly. She said as much to Liuoshi. He confirmed it. The closer they got to the final boss, the more monsters would appear and the stronger and more numerous they would become. The temperature kept falling, the monsters kept stacking up, and the difficulty of this dungeon was operating on a completely different level from any standard E-rank novice dungeon. The monsters charged. Liuoshi didn't move. Mao went first. He stepped forward cleanly and pushed back the wave of incoming monsters. He told Liuoshi to rest and save his focus for the boss. He would handle the crowd. Mao's current stats: level 8, level 11 strength, level 4 stamina, level 9 agility, level 1 mana. His exclusive buff, family heirloom. Bagua hands stacked an additional 2 levels onto both strength and agility. Liuoshi watched him work and felt something close to anticipation. This was exactly what players growing into their potential looked like. Mao surged forward at high speed, leaving afterimages in his wake. His arms swept in wide arcs, releasing waves of blue energy that carved through the monsters ahead with clean, efficient force. He called back for Rui and Liuoshi to follow in his wake. Rui had already known he was strong, but watching it live was something else entirely. Liuoshi acknowledged that Mao could handle the path clearing without issue. But he asked him directly, did he actually know where the floor boss was? Mao went quiet. Then a fresh wave of monsters came rushing from behind. Rui spun and warned him something behind him. He was caught completely off guard. At that distance, there was no time to react. The hit was coming. Then a voice cut through, telling him to get down. He recognized it instantly and dropped. The monsters behind him were struck before they could close the gap. One swing of the sword, several monsters down simultaneously. Rui said she had seen him do things like that multiple times now, and it still didn't feel real. Mao had just been given a very clear, very physical demonstration of the gap between rank 1 and rank 34. Liuoshi told them it was time to move. He already knew where the boss was. He kicked the door to the room open. 2 monsters were launched backward by the impact, and there it was. The D-rank boss, Cat King Little Posy, level 11, 100% health, level 12 strength, level 10 physique, level 16 agility, D-rank skill, Agility Hunter, which boosted its agility by an additional 3 levels. The math on its speed was genuinely unpleasant. It let out a loud, reverberating meow. Rui's face lit up when she saw the enormous cat. She called it really cute. Mao stared at her, then at the massive creature, then back at her. He had no words. Liuoshi knew the numbers cold. Even with his current stats, he couldn't match this boss in raw speed. Its agility buff put it in a different bracket entirely, which meant a straight fight wasn't the approach. He needed another method. He called Aras over. He wanted the little husky to face its old partner. Aras' bark carried a debuff effect, and that was a hidden rule baked into this stage. He told Mao and Rui to keep dealing with the cold spirit monsters as they had been and leave the boss to him. Both of them agreed. Rui wasn't exactly afraid of the monsters, but real combat experience was a different thing from fearlessness, and she knew it. Liuoshi moved in. Several monsters cut across his path. He told them not to get in his way. He cut through them without breaking stride, then dropped into a low crouch. He coiled his legs and launched into a high jump. Aras was startled by how suddenly it happened. The move put Cat King Little Posy on alert, and it did not look pleased. It had already started its attack sequence. He needed to stop it before it connected. He threw Aras forward and told it to bark. Aras did exactly that. Boss Cat King Little Posy was affected. The current boss, Little Posy, had sensed the voice of its companion Aras. Its fighting spirit dropped by 30%, agility fell by 20%, and strength fell by 20%. Liuoshi saw his window open. He moved and landed a decisive heavy blow. Little Posy's health dropped to 1%. Problem solved. On to the next step. He knelt down and asked Little Posy quietly, did it want to come with him and Aras to see its master? Little Posy held still, cautious, watching him. Aras barked again, soft this time, not aggressive. Something in Little Posy's expression shifted. The system notification appeared. Little Posy had sent a team join request. He accepted. Little Posy has joined the team. Negative second floor boss recruited. Rewards confirmed. D-rank attribute cards granting +2 agility and +2 strength, applicable when the attribute value is below level 15. He also received a D-rank item card, Incomplete Upgrade Core. It could upgrade one ability on any weapon or item below D-rank. One of the Blue Vein Sword's abilities was finally getting an upgrade. He had been looking forward to this. He used the attribute cards immediately. Strength rose to level 15, agility to level 12, stamina to level 12, and mana held at level 10. Little Posy joining triggered the hidden mission reward. The whole team received a special buff, Past Intimacy. Plus 20% defense, plus 20% strength, plus 20% agility. A 50% chance to awaken the bottom floor boss's past memories had also been unlocked. Final settlement rewards increased by an additional 50%. Rui saw the buff pop up and her mood lifted instantly. The extra 50% on top of everything else made it even better. The passage to the next floor opened. Liuoshi told them to move forward. The final boss of the bottom floor was waiting, and they were going to face it head-on. This was the first boss in the dungeon that could not be killed through conventional means. Rui could feel the cold pressing through her clothes now. The whole apartment had become something close to an ice cave. Without proper cold weather gear, an ordinary person wouldn't last long just standing in it. The Blue Vein Sword currently only had one skill, so Liuoshi had been thinking about what the upgrade would produce. D-rank skill upgrades typically just boosted damage output, not exactly glamorous but better than nothing. He used the Incomplete Upgrade Core. light gathered around the blade. Then the blue vein sword's status displayed in full. Exclusive Skill 1, Skyrending Slash. Each strike builds blood energy within the blade. Once all nodes turn fully red, it releases a powerful sword wave dealing damage equal to the wielder's current strength level. For every 10 levels gained by the wielder, the sword randomly unlocks one new skill slot. The weapon is permanently bound to its user through soul imprint, cannot be lost, stolen, traded, or dropped, even in death. Then he remembered he had already hit level 10 with the blue vein sword. A second skill slot had quietly unlocked without him realizing it. The incomplete upgrade core was consumed. The blue vein sword had been upgraded. Skyrending Slash advanced to stage 2. The sword wave still dealt damage equal to the wielder's strength level, but now, upon activation, it also temporarily increased the wielder's strength by 2 levels. And there was still one skill draw waiting for him. He decided to check it now. The system initiated the draw for exclusive skill 2. A spread of colored cards materialized before him. Only he could see them, a visual that existed purely in his perception. Gray, green, blue, purple, gold, and red, representing E, D, C, B, A, and S rank skills respectively. He focused and called for the second exclusive skill of the blue vein sword to reveal itself. He reached for the purple card, draw successful. B+ rank skill obtained, Surging Wind. When wielding this weapon, agility increases by 5 levels. Clean and simple, a straight agility boost, and at 5 levels it was anything but modest. Exactly what he needed. They pressed on and ran into more wandering cold spirits now ranging between level 10 and level 12. The monster count on the bottom floor had gone up again. Rui squared her stance, ready to fight. Both Mao and Rui had accepted the reality. If Luoshi decided to step in, every enemy in the room would be gone before either of them blinked. At this point, their primary function felt a lot like moral support. Luoshi told them to take the small fry they needed the levels to, use any attribute cards the moment they dropped. He was heading straight for the boss. Rui asked if he was really going alone again. Mao noticed the pattern. Every single time, Luoshi faced the boss alone. Luoshi explained his goal this time was just to draw it out. He told them to clear the cold spirits, build their levels and attributes, and trust him. They said he could count on them. After he left, Rui went quiet for a moment. Mao caught it and then caught the monster lunging at her from behind. But she had already moved. She threw a clean punch. The monster dropped instantly. Something switched on in her. She told the monsters to come at her. Her fists had a decade of training behind them and she was genuinely curious what they could do now. Rui's current stats: level 6, level 5 strength, level 3 stamina, level 5 agility. She could feel the difference in her body, the power sitting behind every movement. She had trained all this time to protect the people she cared about. 2 monsters came at her simultaneously. She sent both of them flying with one punch. Mao stared at her. He had already suspected her personality didn't match her appearance, but now he was certain of something else. She only let herself loose when Luoshi wasn't watching. A monster came at him from behind. One swing of his arm, the upper half of it ceased to exist. He decided to stop holding back too. Several monsters converged on him, sharp teeth, glowing eyes closing fast. Meanwhile, deeper in the floor, surrounded by a pile of skeletal remains, stood the D-rank bottom floor final boss, the extreme cold yin woman. Level 15, full health. Level 7 strength, level 18 stamina, level 12 agility, level 16 mana. Her D+ rank skill, extreme cold ice spike, could launch up to 6 ice spikes simultaneously. Her eyes were hollow voids. She stepped forward, long dark hair drifted behind her. Empty eyes, horn-like ice protrusions, a towering frame that made the air around her feel several degrees colder. When she saw a human approaching, she chuckled. Luoshi knew the odds. The cries of the 2 companions had a 50% chance of unlocking her buried memories from when she was still alive. The system hadn't stated this directly, but he already knew, and he had only one attempt. She liked humans. Their blood was sweet. She came at him. He moved fast and brought out both companions, making them call out. She paused, but the memory awakening failed. She chuckled again and threw a punch. The 2 small companions were shaken. Luoshi told them it wasn't their fault. He hadn't genuinely expected it to work on the first try. She kept coming, hungry for blood. He kept her engaged and kept moving, stalling for time while Rui and Mao finished clearing the cold spirits. It wasn't difficult for him. With the blue vein sword Surging Wind active, her attacks felt almost leisurely to dodge. Eventually, Rui and Mao finished off the last cold spirit in the area. Mao had reached level 11, level 14 strength, level 8 stamina, level 11 agility, level 3 mana. His family heirloom, Bagua Hands buff, stacked an additional 2 levels onto both strength and agility. Rui had also been keeping track of her own growth. She had reached level 9 strength, level 7 stamina, level 10 agility, level 1 mana. The monster clear had done exactly what Liuoshi said it would. Then a heavy, rhythmic pounding sound started somewhere above them, like something massive repeatedly slamming into the ground, and it was getting closer. Rui wondered aloud whether Liuoshi had already pulled the final boss out. Mao glanced over at Rui and noticed she had quietly straightened up and smoothed herself out. She really did present herself differently when Liuoshi was around. Then he came into view. Rui felt the tension release from her chest, and she saw what was right behind him. Both of them went still. The sheer size of the thing was something else entirely. Liuoshi told them to fall back immediately. They needed to retrace their path and push upward toward the top floors. The final boss began charging extreme cold ice spike. All three of them ran. Mao asked whether he should rotate in and take some of the aggro so Liuoshi could recover. Liuoshi said no, the boss had locked onto him. Until she brought him down, she would not switch targets. System notification: Extreme Cold Yin Woman has locked onto player Liuoshi. She launched an ice spike aiming to claim his blood. He sidestepped it without breaking stride. Mao said flatly that only Liuoshi could describe being actively hunted by something like that as manageable. Rui agreed, only he could say something that terrifying so casually. Or monsters materialized and blocked the path ahead. Standard dungeon behavior: before the final boss was defeated, the mobs and the dungeon itself would keep refreshing. But Mao and Rui handled it. They moved through the pack with clean, efficient strikes. Liuoshi watched them work and felt quietly satisfied. They were getting better in real time. On basement level 1, a cluster of other players were still grinding their way through. One of them landed a solid punch. Qi Shao, his crew erupted in applause. Then the ground started shaking. They saw Liuoshi and the others running toward them at full speed. Qi Shao recognized them. One of his followers was confused. They had gone down toward the final boss, so why were they coming back up? Then they saw it. The extreme cold yin woman in full pursuit and still sitting at 100% health. They understood immediately. The shaking wasn't the building, it was her. Mao shouted at them to clear the path or get flattened. Qi Shao, in a decision that said everything about his character, did not move. He figured he could handle the boss just fine. Liuoshi ran past him. The monster stepped directly on Qi Shao and kept going, not even breaking its pursuit. His crew rushed over, calling his name, but he was just lying there, conscious, unharmed, but staring at the ceiling like his soul had temporarily vacated his body. Liuoshi explained as he ran, once the boss had locked onto a target, it wouldn't actively attack anyone else. Even if you stood directly in front of it, you were effectively invisible to it. Mao admitted he had completely overthought that one. They kept moving. They pushed through the middle floors. The upper levels were a different beast, mutated apartment creatures, denser and more aggressive. Rui asked whether the upper floor bosses had hidden rules like Ara's and Little Posy did. Liuoshi said no. The bosses on the upper floors were fundamentally different. They were everything the top floor final boss had hated most during its life. The top floor boss was the bottom floor boss's father. Making the two of them meet was the only way to clear the stage. But what made it genuinely tragic was that both of them in life had been ordinary people. On the day the top floor boss became a father, his wife had died during childbirth, killed by the negligence of a fraudulent doctor who had no business treating anyone. The daughter grew up without her mother. While her father worked outside, she had no one but their cats and dogs for company. And somehow, despite everything, she had grown up healthy. But one evening, while waiting for her father to come home, she was struck by a car right in front of him. And then the bastards who created this game had taken their souls and sealed them inside this building forever. Only players who discovered the correct clearing method could give them even a moment together again. That brief reunion was what cleared the resentment from their souls. That was why making the two final bosses meet was the key to clearing this stage. Rui absorbed the story quietly. Mao felt something burning behind his ribs, directed entirely at whoever had built this dungeon. Ahead of them, a group of players was struggling against a massive creature. D-rank boss, quack doctor, chainsaw maniac, level 10. Level 12 strength, level 9 stamina, level 10 agility, a fraudulent doctor with a body count. Countless patients had died at his hands while he was alive. The moment Mao saw it, he recognized it immediately, the quack doctor. Rui added that no legitimate physician had ever looked like that in the history of medicine. Liuoshi told everyone around him to get down. The opening was right there. He rushed in and drove his blade through the quack doctor. D-rank boss, quack doctor, chainsaw maniac, defeated. He went straight for the staircase. The other players stared after him, impressed, confused, and very curious who he was. Then the boss appeared again. The players froze. They had no idea why a monster they had been fighting for so long had suddenly reappeared here. They braced for the worst, but it ran straight past them without so much as glancing their way. The monster screamed at Liuoshi, told him he had nowhere to run. The players put it together. Someone had lured it up there. Someone had deliberately cleared the floor below and pulled it all the way up. That realization changed how they were reading the entire dungeon. The floor beneath them had already been cleared, and whoever was running from that thing was operating on a completely different level. Next boss, D-Rank Modified Truck Driver, level 11. Level 17 Strength, level 11 Stamina, level 11 Agility. D-Rank Skill Illegal Modification pushed his strength even further. In life, this man had done violent, off-the-books upgrades to his vehicle purely to haul more cargo and make more money. A kind of person who treated safety regulations as a suggestion. Rui and Mao felt the weight of the thing from across the room. Luoshi didn't slow down. The modified truck driver threw a punch like a wrecking ball. Luoshi launched himself upward and brought the sword down, splitting it clean in half. Defeated, the impact settled. They moved toward the staircase. Something shifted in the shadows behind them. A dark shape twisted and reformed. Somewhere beyond the dungeon walls, an evil god had taken notice. Luoshi and his team were clearing stages at a pace that didn't match the dungeon's intended parameters. To it, they were an anomaly. At the top floor, a mutated freak stood waiting, level 10. And it wasn't alone. Monsters surrounded it in numbers. Every one of them turned simultaneously. They had heard the noise from the floors below. Luoshi told Mao and Rui to push forward. The door ahead led straight to the top floor boss. The mutated freak let out a roar. Luoshi told them to keep moving and leave the rest to him. Several monsters went down. 2 of them broke into a run. They hit the door and shoved it open. The final boss was right there waiting. They had stepped into the top floor boss's domain. The Extreme Cold Ringleader, level 15. Level 16 Strength, level 19 Stamina, level 15 Agility, level 1 Mana. D-Rank Skill, Extreme Cold Breath allowed it to release freezing air at will. Mao muttered that it looked absolutely nothing like the tragic father he had been imagining. And the door slammed shut behind them. The system announced it would not open again until the players outside fulfilled the required conditions. The 2 of them exchanged a look. They were on their own until Luoshi got through. The ringleader roared. Rui processed it quickly. They had to survive alone until Luoshi opened the door. Mao understood what that actually meant, fight to the death and hope it was long enough. A mission triggered. Luoshi had to eliminate all mutated freaks on the floor within 5 minutes or the door to the boss room would stay sealed. This was a late-game rule. It had no business appearing in the second dungeon, and yet here it was. Something else felt wrong. Luoshi had noticed something observing him, something that hadn't existed in his previous life. Not here, not at this stage. He wondered if it was the evil gods watching directly, watching him in particular. His rebirth had already started to change the day of confinement in ways he hadn't predicted. Even with all his memories intact, he understood now that he could not afford to assume anything would play out the same way twice. 5 minutes to clear every monster on the floor. For trash-tier enemies like these, it was more than enough, but he couldn't waste a second. He moved. Every step deliberate, every strike landing exactly where it needed to. Monster after monster fell as he cut through the floor with methodical precision. And some of the monsters started retreating. Luoshi noticed it immediately. Their behavior had shifted. That wasn't normal dungeon AI, something had changed. Then a massive hand shot out toward him. He deflected it with his sword. The extreme cold yin woman had arrived. She had followed him all the way up through the floors. Now he understood. The real difficulty of the mission wasn't the monsters, it was her. She was here to stop him. She stared at him, craving blood. He read her next move before she made it. Ice crystals erupted from the ground, a trap meant to lock him in place. But there was no impact, no blood. He had already slipped behind her and unleashed Skyrending Slash Stage 2. Power surged through the blade. The strike cut her clean in half. She seemed almost amused that he had managed to get behind her. She landed safely, already regenerating. He couldn't kill her, but disabling her temporarily was enough. With her out of the equation for a moment, he could focus on finishing the floor clear and getting that door open. 3 minutes and 15 seconds left, and the boss Mao and Rui were facing on the other side of that door couldn't be killed at all. It was stronger than the yin woman. He just needed them to hold on long enough. He pushed harder. On the other side of the door, the extreme cold ringleader swung. The impact launched someone across the room. Mao slammed into the door and coughed up blood. He couldn't match its speed, not even close. He couldn't track it, couldn't keep up. He couldn't believe this was the level of thing Luoshi had been dealing with alone on the lower floor like it was routine. He had always thought the gap between rank 1 and rank 34 was significant but manageable. He understood now that he had been completely wrong. It wasn't a gap, it was a chasm, and standing on the wrong side of it was humbling in a way he hadn't expected. Rui stepped in and blocked the next hit before it reached him. She told him to get up. They had made a promise hold on until Luoshi arrived. But in the split second her attention shifted, the monster grabbed her. Mao moved, he activated Bagua Han's third form. He drove a strike directly into the monster's face and knocked it to the ground. Rui stared at him. That was not something she had seen him do before. Mao steadied himself. He was not going to give up again, not here, not like this. Even if the gap between him and Liuoshi was as wide as it was, he had something left. He activated Bagua Han's enraged state. Strength surged to level 14, mana to level 10. In this form, he could channel palm force into ranged strikes, the technique his father had always called Bagua True Force. The ringleader got back up and came again. Ao told it not to underestimate him. He struck again, forcing it back. Then he unloaded a rapid chain of palm strikes. The monster was eventually driven to the ground. He hadn't expected the technique his father had drilled into him since childhood to translate like this, but here it was, working in a dungeon against a boss that couldn't be killed. His father had told him once, Bagua Hands wasn't only for close range. Understand its true nature and you could strike from a distance using nothing but the force generated from your palms, but mastery was still a work in progress. Bagua Hands' enraged state had 2 minutes and 13 seconds remaining. He knew the window was closing, 3 minutes total duration and most of it was already gone. The ringleader stood back up and came at him again. He could see it, the wounds from his last exchange had already closed. The boss couldn't be killed. That was simply the reality of this stage, but stopping it was still possible even if destroying it wasn't. He released another wave of palm force. The monster groaned but didn't get pushed back this time. It had already begun adapting to the pattern of his attacks. Then it grabbed his head, faster than he had tracked. He had made the mistake of forgetting just how quickly it could move. There was only one move left, go all in. He threw everything into one final palm strike. The monster didn't budge. His stamina hit empty, the enraged state collapsed early, he was done. Continuous combat had pushed his body past what it could sustain. The ringleader raised its claw, poised to tear him apart. Mao accepted what was coming, then a gunshot rang out. The bullet struck the monster squarely in the back. It dropped. It was Rui. The weapon had originally been meant as a gift for Liuoshi, but saving Mao came first and she knew Liuoshi wouldn't mind. A 6-shot revolver gun-type weapon consumes the user's stamina, auto-reloads, E-rank. Skill precision boosts strength by 3 levels and increases accuracy by 30%. Mao stared at her. He hadn't even noticed when she'd picked that up. He asked if it was a monster drop when had she gotten it. The ringleader was back on its feet and coming straight for Rui. She kept firing, buying every second she could until Liuoshi got through. The monster raised its arms and absorbed the shots. Mao called out, stop engaging directly, keep moving. The boss could adapt to any damage it sustained. It literally could not be killed. Rui processed that and felt the bottom drop out of her stomach a little. Then the monster grabbed her. She gritted her teeth and kept firing, trying to force it to release her. It threw her. She hit the wall hard. Mao got to her immediately. He set it straight. The monster was too strong. They couldn't beat it. The ringleader opened its mouth, preparing to release extreme cold breath. Both of them understood what that meant. This was the end. Rui's mind went somewhere quiet for a moment. Mao asked if she had any regrets. The freezing breath was building, about to swallow them completely. Rui said she regretted not dying alongside Liuoshi. Then the door exploded open. The freezing breath detonated across the room. They froze not from the cold but from shock. Liuoshi had arrived. He told them something unexpected had come up. Rui felt something release in her chest that she couldn't name. Mao said that was twice now that Liuoshi had pulled him back from the edge. Liuoshi assessed the room and told them it was over. The clearing conditions had been met. 1 second later and it wouldn't have been. The extreme cold yin woman was still fixed on Liuoshi, still craving blood. But then something happened. The two massive monsters turned toward each other and for a moment both of them simply looked confused. The system announced the hidden clearing condition had been fulfilled. A reunion that should have been impossible. The two recognized each other. The level clear storyline activated. Their monstrous forms began to dissolve, shifting, shrinking, returning to something human. A girl's voice, small and uncertain, called out father. A man's voice, rough and broken, called back daughter. They moved toward each other and held on. And just like that, the stage was cleared. The full weight of their memories, every moment of their tragic story, flooded into the minds of every player present. Rui stood quietly, feeling the full shape of it. A father and daughter separated by a game that had never given them a choice. Mao stood next to her, jaw set, burning with a cold, quiet fury directed at whoever sat at the top of all of this. But Liuoshi felt something off. Everything had followed the same sequence as his memory, and yet a mission had triggered that hadn't existed before. Something had changed. From somewhere above it all, an evil god complained it had ended too fast, unsatisfying. Then something appeared directly in front of them. Rui asked what it was. A boss-level triggered mission the god's scout had descended. Its purpose was singular, reset the stage and give its god what it wanted. The god's scout informed them they did not understand divine grace. Its function was to ensure God was entertained, God was to be pleased, God was to be satisfied. It declared that the true grand performance was only just beginning. It released chains that shot outward and wrapped around everyone. Father and daughter twisted back into their monstrous forms. Both of them groaned in visible pain. Rui and Mao couldn't believe what they were watching. Arez and Little Posy rushed toward the two bosses, frantic, distressed. Rui moved to stop them, but the god's scout had already turned its attention toward them. Mao understood instantly it was going to turn them into monsters too. That was not going to happen. Liuoshi was already moving. He intercepted the attack in a flash and deflected it. Rui's eyes snapped to him tense. The god scout studied Liuoshi and concluded this one was the source of the interference. This anomaly was the reason the performance kept derailing. Liuoshi had noticed this thing from the moment it appeared, and he could tell immediately it was different from anything else in this dungeon. No level prompt, no health bar, not hostile in the conventional sense. In his entire previous life, he had never encountered anything like it. The god scout made its decision. The anomaly needed to be eliminated. The extreme cold yin woman and the extreme cold ringleader both turned on Liuoshi and charged. He threw Arez and Little Posy toward Mao and Rui, keeping them out of the blast zone. His hand moved to his sword. He drove a powerful slash forward and caught both monsters at the same time. He knew they wouldn't die from it, so he cut across the waist, taking them down temporarily to buy himself time. The extreme cold ringleader's health dropped to 82%. The yin woman's dropped to 79%. He stared at those numbers. Their health was actually going down. A new mission triggered. Phase 2 of the extreme cold apartment boss battle had begun. Objective: behead both bosses and extinguish their souls. This time, killing them would allow them to leave this place permanently. Mao asked what that even meant. The god scout answered simply, it meant exactly what it said. Kill the monsters, erase their souls completely. After all, they were humans who had already offered their souls to God. The god scout assumed this would not be a moral burden for the players. They were players. This was the game. It turned to Liuoshi and asked if that was correct. Liuoshi looked at it with undisguised contempt. Rui called it a bastard, not mincing words. Mao wasn't far behind. Those two had been people once, people who had done nothing wrong and had been handed nothing but tragedy. The god scout pointed out patiently that everything served God's enjoyment. God was watching from above. Failing to deliver a satisfying performance was, in its words, blasphemy. Rui raised her revolver and fired at it, telling it flat out that she didn't give even a fraction of a damn whether their god was satisfied. She told it to end the mission. The god scout reached out and caught the bullet between two fingers. It noted that her power was insufficient to cause it any harm. Mao stared at it. It had caught a bullet with its bare hands. No level prompt, nothing. He couldn't even begin to guess what it was. Liuoshi was equally surprised. He had not expected it to reach out and stop the shot that cleanly, and that ease told him a great deal about what they were dealing with. Both monsters charged at him. He stepped back and let them pass. He couldn't draw his sword on them, not like this. Killing them now would mean erasing the people they had once been, their real selves, their real souls. They were acting as bosses right now, but they had done nothing to deserve any of this. They were just trying to hold onto one small moment of something that should have been theirs all along. Something hit the ground. And it stopped him cold. The extreme cold ringleader was crying. He could not believe what he was seeing. Then he heard it, their voices pushing through the surface, begging him to kill them, to set them free. He stood still and listened. The daughter's voice broke through first. She said they didn't want to keep existing like this. She begged him to end it, end their pain. They couldn't control their bodies anymore. Even as they begged him, their forms kept coming at him. They kept begging, kill us, free us. Please. They didn't want to keep existing like this, hurting others just to survive, trapped in forms that weren't theirs anymore. They kept begging, over and over. The god scout watched their suffering with visible satisfaction and declared, this was precisely the performance God had been waiting for. It explained, almost cheerfully, that God loved turning beauty into pain and hope into despair. Nothing brought God more joy than watching cruelty unfold in real time. Liuoshi promised them he would help. He moved fast, but before he freed them, there was something he needed to do first, take down the thing that had been playing with them like toys. And make sure it happened right in front of their eyes. The god scout was caught completely off guard. It reminded him of what it was, a god scout, as if the title alone should have made him hesitate. It didn't. He already knew it wasn't immortal. He slashed it. The god scout couldn't process what had just happened. Liuoshi told it plainly one day he would cut down their god too. But for now, he was sending this scout straight to hell to wait for the rest of them. The god scout screamed for its god, then it was swallowed by the explosion. Even in its final moments, it couldn't comprehend it. A mere human had actually killed it. It detonated. Rui exhaled, it was done. But then Liuoshi noticed something else. Another creature materialized, furious that its subordinate had been killed by something as insignificant as a player. Rui and Mao went rigid. The silhouette had long flowing hair, a single eye at its center, and long curved horns like a caribou. Behind its shadow loomed a massive demonic face, glowing red eyes, a twisted grin full of jagged teeth, something that felt ancient and wrong. The pressure it radiated was immediate and overwhelming. Rui could barely find words. Mao felt the air leave his lungs, just its presence made breathing feel like effort. Liuoshi looked at it and asked directly, did it plan to fight them too? The creature said that by God's rules it was forbidden from attacking players inside a dungeon, but it made one thing very clear, it would take his head eventually. The next time they met, it would make him perform for God personally. Until then, it told him to stay alive long enough to be worth its time, then it was gone. Rui and Mao both felt the pressure lift at once. Their knees nearly gave out. Rui said she had barely been able to breathe. Mao agreed that thing was on a completely different level from anything they had faced. Liuoshi processed what had just happened quietly. In this life, the evil god's interference had already progressed further than he remembered. He could feel the power that creature carried, it was unmistakably divine. He suspected it might be the spokesperson the gods had deployed to oversee things. Something to look into, but it didn't change anything. No matter what moved against him, he would keep pushing toward the same ending, the one where every last one of those gods was dead. The father and daughter had gone still. Liuoshi looked at them. They thanked him for getting angry on their behalf, for caring when they had long since stopped expecting anyone to. They asked him to send them off. He nodded and tightened his grip on his sword. He took a breath. He was going to make this as painless as possible. He moved cleanly. Both heads fell at the same instant. Their souls rose from their bodies, weightless, quiet, finally free. They thanked him. Because for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they were free. He said goodbye and wished them better luck in whatever came next. Rui and Mao stood in silence for a moment. It was over. And as painful as the ending had been, they both understood it was the best one available to them. Little Posy and auras began to glow softly, then they lifted off the ground. One last meow, one last woof. Mao and Rui told them to find happiness wherever they were going. Goodbye. With that, the extreme cold apartment dungeon was cleared. The dungeon had run its course. The environment began to collapse around them. The survival reward was distributed, a D-rank attribute activation card issued to every surviving player. Everything obtained inside the dungeon could be brought back to reality. Elsewhere in the dungeon, the cold was still brutal. Several players were collapsed on the ground, shaking. The temperature had gotten so low that fighting monsters was no longer the issue, just staying conscious was the challenge. Some of them had genuinely begun to believe they were going to freeze to death. Then a monster roar echoed through the corridors. Qi Shao and his crew were running for their lives. One of his men gasped that at this rate, the cold was going to kill them before the monsters did. Another one wondered out loud, how had the world's #1 player made any of this look easy? Then Qi Shao slipped and hit the floor. His crew panicked. The monster was closing in fast. He lay there accepting his fate. His dream of becoming #1 apparently ending on this floor in this hallway face down. Then the D-rank dungeon cleared. A final gust of wind swept through the entire building. Qi Shao exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. The other players erupted. The cold was gone. The activation cards had dropped into their hands. They were buzzing with questions: what kind of monster had cleared this dungeon and how? The contribution leaderboard appeared. Liuoshi 82.3%, Mao 10.6%, Rui 7%. Every other player in the dungeon 0.1%. The other players stared at the board. Second and third place made sense. First place did not compute. The system then confirmed the attribute rewards: strength, agility, stamina, and mana, all boosted by 3 levels across the board for surviving players. Rui felt the jump immediately and couldn't hide how happy she was about it. Mao noted that D-rank dungeon rewards were in a completely different bracket from the novice dungeons, no comparison. Rui's final stats is strength level 15, agility level 13, mana level 4. She also had her 6-shot revolver equipped with the precision skill, stacking an additional 3 levels of strength and boosting her accuracy by 30%. Mao's final stats is strength level 17, agility level 14, stamina level 11, mana level 6. His family heirloom, Bagua Hand's buff, continued to add 2 levels to both strength and agility on top of that. But the survival rewards were only the base. The contribution-based rewards were still coming. Rui's contribution-based reward for 7%, an attribute card called Mage's Blessing, raising her mana by 5 levels along with Elf's Grace at level 3. Her world player contribution points climbed to 350. She stared at the reward and complained that it wasn't particularly useful for her current build. Mao's contribution-based reward for 6%, a weapon card, Grandmaster of Martial Arts, Damaged Gloves, E-Rank, plus an attribute card, Martial Artist's Leg Practice, boosting agility by 3 levels. His world player contribution points also reached 350, not a bad haul. He equipped the gloves and the weapon skill activated, Grandmaster's Remnant Might, a 3% chance to deal double damage in close combat. 3% sounded small, but in a fight that came down to one exchange, a 3% chance to double your damage could be the entire difference between winning and losing. Rui turned to Luoshi and asked what he had received. He said casually, just some points and a fragment card. What he didn't mention was that it was a fragment of an S-rank card. With 3% contribution, his reward was an S-rank card fragment, details unknown until assembled. His world player contribution points jumped to 4,115. Rui couldn't believe that was all he got for that kind of contribution score. Mao found it genuinely suspicious. He couldn't work out what logic the system was using to determine that. Luoshi admitted that it looked like a trash reward on the surface, but it made sense once you understood the context. There were only 15 S-rank cards in the entire day of confinement, each one carrying power that operated on a completely different scale. They were not handed out freely. Getting the Freedom card had required topping the world rankings in the Novice Dungeon. Getting time reversal in his previous life had cost him everything. Receiving even a fragment of an S-rank card this early into the game was, by any measure, extraordinarily lucky. He needed 4 fragments to assemble a complete S-rank card. Details of the card itself remained unknown. The day of confinement had been built by evil gods, but its rules were ironically fair: perform well, get rewarded; fail, die. That applied to players, to the gods' followers, and as far as Luoshi was concerned, it would eventually apply to the gods themselves. For now, the fragment went into storage, but it meant he was one step closer to the day he would tear their whole game apart. World Player Contribution Leaderboard updated. Luoshi rank 1, 7,615 points. Han Shenhai rank 2, 1,310. Liu Yan rank 3, 1,290. Yun Yan rank 4, 1,280. Jun Yan rank 5, 1,280. Zhang Lun rank 6, 1,280. Rui was glad to see her name on the board at all. 634 points after the 350 gain, she was on the list. Mao scanned the rankings and noted how compressed the mid-tier scores were, a lot of tied positions, very tight margins. He was sitting at 31st place with 740 points. Luoshi observed the board and said that once players started properly understanding the rules, more serious talent would emerge. That was exactly why he had distributed the Novice Dungeon Strategy Guide before any of this started. Mao pointed out that this would directly create more rivals for Luoshi. Luoshi said that wasn't the point. His goal was to save the world, and the more capable allies they had, the better their odds of actually doing it. This wasn't a personal competition. It was a fight for the survival of humanity itself and the planet it lived on. Going forward, he wanted them to fight for humanity, not just for personal gain or individual survival. Both of them went quiet for a moment. Mao admitted out loud that he had been thinking too small and promised to carry those words with him. Rui felt something shift in her, a motivation that went beyond just waking her parents up. Luoshi said he hoped to see them again in the real world. Both of them answered without hesitation yes. Back at the hospital, Luoshi's mother noticed he was awake. He glanced over at the bed beside him. Qing was still out. Day of confinement pulled the consciousness out of the body. Whatever Qing had packed in that enormous backpack was completely useless inside the game. His mother assumed he was hungry and went to make him something to eat. He watched her go and noticed how calm she seemed. The Freedom card had done its job. The day of confinement had no hold on her anymore. She had already adjusted to the new reality around her better than most people would. Then the system notified him he had claimed first place on the World Player Contribution rankings. An additional reward was being issued. Whether players were still inside the game or had already returned to reality, none of them had come close to surpassing his score. The system had decided to release the reward early. A dark card materialized in front of him. He examined it carefully. A class change card? Shadow Mage Apprentice. Upon use, the holder changes class to Dark Mage Apprentice, gaining the skill Dark Orb along with initial attribute boosts. Description: rare dark elementalists begin their journey as apprentices who accept the power of darkness. He had seen this class reach its full potential in his previous life. Someone had evolved all the way into a dark archmage and leveled an entire city alone. That person had been evil, but no one who witnessed it could deny the raw, terrifying power of the class at its peak. Classes weren't inherently good or bad. In the right hands, they were a shield. In the wrong hands, a weapon of destruction. It all came down to the person holding it. He already had his class. This one was going to someone who could actually use it. He just needed to figure out who. His mother came back with his favorite noodles. He smiled and thanked her. Everything else could wait. For just this one moment, he wanted to sit here and enjoy something that felt completely normal. He told her the food was delicious. Then someone knocked on the door. He opened it and found Rui standing there. He hadn't expected her to show up this quickly. She was barely holding herself together. Her parents had fallen into a coma. She needed to know why, and she needed to know now. He told her plainly they were trapped inside the day of confinement. She grabbed onto that and asked immediately, was there a way to save them? He told her to breathe. Right now, there was no shortcut. There was only one freedom card in existence. Outside of that S-rank card, there was no mechanism that could pull someone out of the game. If someone died inside, they fell into a permanent coma in the real world. Their body wouldn't shut down immediately, but without someone to maintain their care, they would eventually be lost to organ failure or worse. Tears filled her eyes. She asked if there was really no other way. He looked at her for a moment. Then he made his decision. He told her there was one way: use the class change card, grow stronger, clear dungeon after dungeon, and keep going. He stared at him. In plain terms, she had to become strong enough to help hunt down the beings who had created this game. When that day came, everyone who was still trapped would finally wake up. Rui asked if using the card would really make her stronger. He said yes, it would. But there was a risk, and he wasn't going to hide it from her. If she lacked the will to resist what came with it, the negative influence baked into the card itself, she would lose herself. She would become a tool of the evil gods, turned against the very people she wanted to protect. She hadn't expected a class change card to come with something like that hidden inside it. He explained anything created or distributed by the evil gods carried hidden malice. That was just how they operated. Class changes in Day of Confinement worked like they did in any game, a path to becoming stronger. But in this game, that power came bundled with something darker. Embedded inside every class change card was a fragment of an evil god's consciousness. To successfully change class, the user had to mentally overpower it. Even a fragment was enough to shatter most people's minds completely. Those who failed didn't just lose the class, they were taken over, converted into believers, servants of the very gods destroying their world. As for why Luoshi himself hadn't been affected, his heart had been forged in his previous life. Everything he had lost, everything he had endured, it had turned him into something the evil god's consciousness couldn't gain a foothold in. From the moment he came back, he had only one driving purpose: destroy them. Rui sat with that for a moment. If she didn't get stronger, her parents would never wake up. More people would keep falling into comas. More families would be destroyed just like hers. She said she was willing to try. She reached out for the card and someone else's hand caught hers first. Luoshi's mother? She told Rui gently that she was still young and she shouldn't rush headfirst into something this dangerous. If her parents were watching, they would never agree to this. Rui looked at her and said quietly, Luoshi was risking his life for others. She wanted to do the same. Their love for their families was no different. His mother had no response to that. She could only wish her luck and mean it. Rui took the card, looked at Luoshi directly, and told him if she ever turned into something that threatened the people around her, he should kill her without hesitation. The Dark Mage Apprentice class change began. She placed her trust in him completely. But deep down, he already knew he could never do that so easily. He remembered her from his previous life. She had taken a hit meant for him and told him to run. So this time, whatever she became, he was going to bring her back whole. That was his promise, even if she never heard it. Black mist began to pour over her body. The pain hit immediately. She screamed, her eyes rolling back as the darkness flooded in. They watched as the mist kept coming, relentless. His mother asked in a frightened voice what was happening to Rui. He told her to go outside and not let anyone in unless he said so. Inside Rui's mind, the evil god's consciousness had begun its invasion. To intervene, he needed mental-type abilities, and he didn't have any in his current kit. But something inside him did. He had felt it before, a presence with spiritual capabilities that had been with him longer than he could account for. He called out to it. Gabriel answered. It said simply that it was everywhere. Its presence was natural. Luoshi asked if Gabriel could send him into Rui's mental world. Gabriel confirmed it could, but warned clearly that it could not enter alongside him. That door was Rui's alone. Told him the stakes directly. If he failed to overcome what was invading her mind, he would die inside it. He said he wouldn't die, he knew he would win. Gabriel seemed satisfied with that. It told him to go, but added a caveat. He had passed its trial once before. If he couldn't handle something this small by comparison, then he wasn't worthy of what they were offering him. A light burst from Luoshi's chest. It reached across and connected to Rui's. He was not going to let the evil gods take his comrade, not here, not while he was standing right there. He closed his eyes and let himself be pulled in. he entered Rui's mental world. Shadow figures were everywhere. He scanned the space, trying to locate where Rui's soul actually was. Then he saw them. Two versions of Rui, one holding a revolver and firing with precision, the other fighting barehanded with raw, explosive aggression. He had no idea what to make of that, two of her. A shadow spoke. If she wanted the power the darkness offered, she had to earn it. Survive the siege of the dark element apprentices and it would acknowledge her. But the situation was already deteriorating. More enemies kept spawning in, closing the circle around both versions of Rui. Even so, neither of them stopped. For her parents, she was not going to give up. The monsters raised their arms toward the sky and launched black fireballs downward. They detonated on impact. Rui knew if even one of those connected directly, it was over. Gun Rui told martial artist Rui to create an opening. She needed a clear shot to fire. But the monsters kept coming. There were simply too many. Then a voice cut through the chaos saying he would help and a figure sliced through the monster line. Both versions of Rui stopped and stared. Luoshi told her quickly the dark element mages were class change illusions. He couldn't damage them. Rui had to be the one to defeat them herself. But the evil god's consciousness embedded in the space that he could deal with. He kept cutting through the shadow creatures around her. He was furious that these things had dared to invade his comrade's mind right in front of him. He channeled every bit of that fury into every swing. Rui watched him and couldn't figure out how he had even gotten here, but seeing him here in her own mind, she could also see just how overwhelming the gap between them really was. Those shadow creatures didn't even slow him down. Rui made a decision. She left the shadow enemies to Luoshi and redirected her full focus onto the three mages who were forming an enormous concentrated orb between them. The dark mages released it. Rui froze for a split second when she saw the scale of it coming toward her. Martial artist Rui grabbed Gun Rui and pulled her clear just before it hit. The ground where they had been standing was gone, completely devoured. That was when it clicked for both of them. This class had a devouring effect. He hadn't been exaggerating. She got back to her feet. Then more orbs began raining down. Martial artist Rui kept pulling Gun Rui clear while Gun Rui kept firing between dodges. The orbs were coming in two modes, charged and instant cast. The unpredictability of the switch was the real danger. Gun Rui made a call. They couldn't keep evading forever. They had to push back. She fired at the mages. Two clean shots knocked 15% off their health. Their defense was absurdly high, but damage was damage. Martial artist Rui called the split. She would handle the movement and evasion. Gun Rui focused entirely on attacking, simple in concept, but far from simple in practice. In this mental space, their physical limits mirrored reality. If their stamina ran dry before those three mages went down, they would lose. No second attempt. She moved with precision, never wasting a step. Even reloading cost stamina. Every action was a resource. She was going to make every single shot count. Meanwhile, Luoshi noticed the shadow creatures had stopped rushing him. They had bunched together instead, since they weren't attacking. He pressed forward. The creatures started to retreat. Then they fused into a single form. They were trying to escape. He was not about to let that happen. Then a massive shadow creature materialized and stepped directly into his path. He hadn't expected that. It was enormous, a towering dark figure with glowing purple eyes and a wide mouth lined with jagged teeth. The pressure it radiated filled the space around it like a physical weight. He had suspected this was coming. Even a fragment of an evil god's consciousness shouldn't reveal its true form this easily. This was it showing what it actually was. The creature lashed out with dark vines. He cut through them without slowing down. He studied it as he moved. It was weak, genuinely weak, just wearing an intimidating shell. He kept attacking. It hadn't anticipated his speed. He tightened his grip. It didn't matter whether the thing in front of him was weak or powerful. He kept slashing, relentless. Then a voice reached him, not through sound but directly into his mind. It praised the clarity of his strikes, called him an intelligent life not yet consumed by blind reason, and told him to keep going. He registered immediately that this wasn't a voice in any conventional sense. It felt like something being translated directly into his understanding, not from any earth language but from something else entirely, something broadcast like a signal. It told him that the S-rank special cards were resistance, a chance at survival that had been deliberately created and left behind. The beings who made them had already been devoured by the evil gods. These cards were their final act. It warned him, do not be misled by the evil gods, do not become like them, do not help destroy your own civilization. Luoshi absorbed that. The S-rank cards were not game rewards. They were the last hope left behind by civilizations that had already fallen. Which meant the ones sending this message were likely intelligent beings from other worlds, other planets that had already lost to the evil gods, leaving this behind as their final inheritance. He had always believed S-ranked cards held power the gods couldn't control, that they were some kind of accidental byproduct of the game. Now he understood it was nothing of the sort. These were weapons of resistance, and he was going to claim every single one of them. He declared it quietly but without wavering. This planet would become the grave of every evil god that had caused this suffering. Then he felt the evil god's presence dissolve. It had been driven out, and with it gone, he realized he couldn't stay in Rui's mental world much longer either. He was an intruder here, the space had limits. Back to the two Ruis, they now stood facing the three remaining mages alone. He could see it, she was ready to finish this herself. Rui looked up and noticed him starting to fade. She asked if he was leaving. Martial artist Rui couldn't believe he had already cleared every single one of those shadow creatures. He told her to keep her focus on completing the class change. He said they would meet again in reality. Rui caught the word they, her eyes flickered. Something had slipped. She kept her expression neutral and let it pass without comment. Mages were still building their next massive orb. Rui locked in. If she wanted to wake her parents up, this was the only path forward. She would walk it. Both versions of Rui charged at the mages together. Luoshi watched her take her first real step on the path toward fighting the evil gods and toward becoming the most trusted ally he had ever had. Back in the hospital room, his mother had been holding herself together with visible effort. Even knowing her son had grown into someone capable, none of what was happening around them fit into any framework she had grown up with. She understood that the world had shifted into something beyond common sense. She just hadn't fully accepted the shape of it yet. People across the country had suddenly fallen into deep comas, kept alive only through nutrient lines and medical care. Some individuals who had returned from whatever had happened to them were now turning violent, attacking strangers in the streets without warning or apparent reason. She also kept thinking about a strange dream she'd had of puppet-like monsters chasing and killing people. She couldn't shake it. With everything happening, all she wanted was to know that her son, Rui, and Qing were safe. Then he walked back through the door. He checked on Rui immediately. Her condition was stabilizing. He already knew what that meant. She was going to make it. The black mist around her was slowly being contained, drawing back. He allowed himself a small smile. The system confirmed it with a notification. Rui had successfully changed class, Dark Mage Apprentice A rank, skill gained, Dark Orb, trait gained, Dark Element Affinity. She opened her eyes, visibly stunned that she had actually pulled it off. She thanked him sincerely for what he had done in her dream, and she chose deliberately to treat it as just a dream. She wasn't ready to let him know what she had seen or what it meant. Then Qing shot upright with a shout. She immediately asked what was wrong. Qing registered Luoshi's face and froze for half a second, then grabbed him by the arm and begged to be sent back into the dungeon. Luoshi told him to calm down first. He explained once a dungeon was cleared, it was gone, completely. There was no going back. Qing's eyes filled. He asked, his voice cracking, what about the people who died inside? Was there still a chance for them? The moment felt familiar. It was exactly the same as what had happened in Qing's second dungeon in Luoshi's previous life. In that life, Qing had met someone who had sacrificed herself to save him. She had fallen from a great height into fire below. Luoshi didn't know the full details, only what Qing had told him in scattered, grief-stricken pieces. He had to be careful here. The wrong words could push Qing somewhere he couldn't come back from. He had even considered pulling Qing into his own dungeon next time just to keep him away from this kind of pain. But he knew that wouldn't be right. Qing needed to walk his own path. Qing broke down, apologizing to someone who wasn't in the room, blaming himself over and over. Luoshi understood. He couldn't make this choice for him. He couldn't take away the grief either. But what he could do in this life was defeat the evil gods and free everyone still trapped inside. That was the answer to every unanswerable question sitting in this room right now. He decided to give Qing something to hold on to first. He told him the person he was grieving wasn't dead in reality yet. Qing's eyes came up from the floor immediately. Luoshi showed him the news, the mass coma reports that had been spreading across every major platform. Qing stared at it, not connecting the dots yet. Rui stepped in and explained it clearly. Dying inside the game didn't mean dying in the real world. It meant falling into a coma. The body stayed alive. Qing processed that slowly, then it clicked. Zio was still alive, just unconscious, still reachable. Rui added that her own parents were in the same situation, and Luoshi had told her what it would take to bring them back, clear the day of confinement, find the ones behind it. Take them down. She asked Qing directly, would he fight alongside them? Qing didn't take even a second to think about it. Yes. The energy in the room shifted. All three of them were carrying something heavy, but for the first time, it felt like something they were carrying together. In the previous timeline, the complete absence of reliable information had driven returning players into despair almost immediately. They had come back with power but no direction, no framework, no hope. This time was different. They had something the previous timeline never had. Luoshi told Qing that the most urgent priority right now was getting stronger. By this point, he had already fallen significantly behind. Qing's current stats level 4, strength level 5, stamina, agility, and mana all at level 4. Anyone who had survived the first 2 dungeons should have reached level 4 across their base attributes. Which meant outside of a single strength card advantage, Qing had largely been carried through both dungeons. He was not going to let that continue to be the story. Qing, apparently unbothered by that assessment, turned to Rui and asked what level she was at. Rui said it wasn't that high and that Luoshi had helped her level up significantly. Qing found out she was already level 9 with a class and a weapon. His expression went through several stages, then he made the mistake of asking how strong Luoshi actually was. What he saw next was well beyond what he had been prepared for. Qing immediately latched onto Luoshi's arm and started begging to be carried too, but then he caught himself and straightened up. He said it properly, he wanted to protect the world he cared about. Even if the enemies they were facing were on a level that shouldn't be possible, he would fight to the end. What he didn't realize was that this was exactly the kind of person Luoshi had been hoping for. Luoshi was genuinely glad, for now at least they all shared the same goal. He told them it was time to understand who they were actually up against. He called them evil gods. Rui and Qing both went quiet when they heard those 2 words together. He explained what he knew. For now, the evil gods only existed inside the day of confinement. They could not manifest in reality. That was one of the rules they bound themselves to, at least for now. But once the game produced a winner, once its purpose was fulfilled, they would descend on Earth and consume the entire planet. The full weight of that landed on both of them, cosmic-level beings. Qing admitted quietly that this might actually be too difficult for them. Luoshi asked if he wanted to give up. Rui thought about her parents lying in hospital beds. Qing saw Xiao falling into the flames. Both of them said no. At the same time, Luoshi nodded and told them where their actual chance at victory lay. The 15 S-rank special cards. Each one held power that operated beyond what even the evil gods could fully control. If they could gather all 15, they would have a real shot at fighting back and winning. Rui asked if their job was just to help him find those cards. Qing said the goal was clear enough. Rui then asked how many dungeons the Day of Confinement actually contained and which ones held S-rank cards. Luoshi explained that the evil gods had woven the dungeons directly into human society. Because of that integration, there were thousands of them at minimum. Both of them stared. Qing couldn't believe it and then immediately questioned how Luoshi had managed to write a complete guide for the novice dungeons at all. Luoshi said that was only possible because there were exactly 19 types of novice dungeons. A fixed, finite set documenting them was actually manageable. As for the S-rank cards, he already knew of at least one dungeon that contained one, and he had a plan to get to it. He thought briefly of the woman who, in another timeline, had chosen to betray humanity. He told Qing to go home and rest. In 3 days, he would take him into the next dungeon. At that moment, the screen appeared in their vision, the countdown to the next day of confinement activation. Rui had just completed her class change. She understood now that her growth from this point on depended entirely on herself. Meanwhile, Luoshi had someone he needed to meet. The S-rank Freedom card granted him the ability to enter and exit dungeons freely, but it required a locked coordinate, which meant he needed direct contact with his target first. He went to find the woman who had once introduced herself as his ex-girlfriend. She hadn't expected him to come looking for her. The last time they had spoken, he had rejected her and walked away. She had assumed their connection was over. He told her to skip the pleasantries. He already knew she had survived 2 dungeons. She confirmed it, luck, she said both times. In his previous life, he had encountered her at exactly this point too. But by then, she had already crossed the line. She had sold herself to the evil gods, traded her soul for continued survival. That wasn't really surviving, but she had convinced herself it was. Luoshi was immune to spiritual influence, which meant he could perceive things others couldn't detect at all. And standing in front of her now, he could clearly see the evil god's aura wrapped around her. Something invisible to anyone without his particular immunity. That aura told him everything. Inside a dungeon, she had helped the evil gods eliminate every other human player. In exchange, they had granted her that aura and let her walk out alive. One more dungeon and the conversion would be complete. She would become a full servant, no turning back. She asked why he had come to see her. With just the 2 of them alone, she shifted her tone, hinting at something more, keeping her voice warm and carefully calibrated. She had already mapped out the play in her head. If she could tie him to her emotionally, she could control him. In her mind, she planned to offer him to her god, let the god consume the world's #1 player, and in exchange, buy herself a way out of the game she was so tired of playing. She even thought of using his life as the price for her own survival. He simply told her he would be joining her next dungeon. She hadn't seen that coming. She had expected him to need convincing, and he was offering on his own. He told her that if she agreed, they should shake hands so he could leave a mark on her. He was using the Freedom Card's coordinate locking ability. She took his hand with a smile, then leaned in slightly and suggested there was room for something more than a handshake. He pulled away, told her they would meet again in the dungeon, and turned to leave. He left. She stood there, irritated in a way she wasn't used to. No man had ever dismissed her that openly. She told herself he would regret it. The day came. Players were transported into the game. Liuoshi reminded Qing of the rules one final time. Qing said he remembered everything. Liuoshi activated the Freedom Card's second use. The system confirmed target coordinate locked to Jian's dungeon. Confirm entry. He confirmed. The dungeon name Doomsday Paradise. Freedom activates. Liuoshi and Qing enter the C-rank dungeon Doomsday Paradise. Their bodies began to pixelate at the edges. Collecting all 15 S-rank cards was Liuoshi's true objective. That meant entering dungeons he had never cleared in his previous life, pushing into territory he had no map for. From this moment on, his path to becoming stronger would look nothing like the one he had walked before. They materialized inside Doomsday Paradise, Stage 1 Preparation Room. Qing immediately noticed something was different. A preparation room. He hadn't seen that in any of the previous dungeons. Liuoshi suspected it was tied to rules specific to this stage. He had only seen second-hand clearing guides for this dungeon, broad strokes, nothing detailed. For now, he observed everything around him and started building his situational read. A system window opened, welcoming all players to Doomsday Paradise. Before the game began, every player had the right to form a team. The instructions were simple: click on another player's avatar and send an invitation. If accepted, they became teammates. Team limit: 3 people. Qing looked around the preparation room and was caught off guard by the sheer number of players present. He asked Liuoshi who they should pick as their third. Jian was already working for the evil gods. Letting her onto any other team would mean she'd start harvesting players immediately. Instead of letting strangers bear that risk, it made more sense to keep her close, where Liuoshi could suppress her if it came to that. Having her in his team also meant having eyes on her at all times. It was the cleanest solution available. Meanwhile, Jian was doing her own calculations. Teaming with him gave her proximity to the world's #1 player, which had value. But joining another team and quietly helping her god harvest lives from the inside was also tempting. Then a team invitation appeared in front of her, from Liuoshi and Qing. She was a little amused. She hadn't expected them to move first. She told herself that being alongside the world's #1 would make things significantly easier, and besides, she had her own plans for him. She accepted. The moment she did, she was teleported to their position. Qing looked at her and immediately felt something was off. She put on a startled expression and moved toward Liuoshi as if to hug him in relief. He sidestepped her smoothly. Not today. He told Qing calmly to open the door. Their team was full and the stage was ready. Qing didn't know exactly why she was there, but he trusted that Liuoshi had a reason. So he let it go and did what he was told. Jian felt the dismissal and let it settle into something colder. She told herself he would come crawling to her eventually. They always did. She was confident. Her god fed her the hidden rules in advance. She already had information the other players didn't. She had already started planning how to use that advantage to back him into a corner he couldn't escape. They opened the door. An eerie forest waited on the other side. Doomsday Paradise Stage 1, Zombies in the Woods. The rule displayed simply: the top 30 teams with the highest point totals could advance to the next stage. The leaderboard was live. Team 7, Liuoshi, Qing, and Jian, was currently ranked 7th. Qing immediately noticed how vague the rules were. It didn't even explain how points were actually earned. Jian filled the silence helpfully. Zombies in the woods meant killing zombies earn points. More kills, more points. Simple. Qing looked at Liuoshi and asked if there were really zombies out here. Liuoshi told him to keep moving. This stage wasn't as complicated as it looked. He pushed forward, then they met the zombies. Qing's composure lasted exactly until they were close enough to see clearly. Yes, very real. The zombies heard them and closed in. Qing started panicking as the wave converged, and then Liuoshi simply drew his sword. He made his move. The zombies in front of him dropped. Qing stared. He had seen strong people before, but watching Liuoshi fight in person, there was no word for it that felt accurate. The closest thing he could come up with was this, like a god walking on earth. Jian watched from a few steps back and quietly updated her assessment. The world's #1 truly was absurdly, unreasonably strong. Now she understood in full why her god wanted him so badly. Qing kept moving through the zombies alongside him. To get any real leads on the S-rank card hidden in this dungeon, Liuoshi needed to take first place in every stage. That was the requirement. He already knew there were other serious players who had reached this level. His challenge was figuring out how to pull far enough ahead of all of them and hold it. The basic zombies in the immediate area were cleared. Team 7 gained 50 points. Ching assumed that was probably enough for first place. Jian even complimented them, all warm smiles, but Liuoshi knew better. Basic zombie clear rates would be similar across every competitive team. The gap wasn't there yet. The live rankings confirmed it. Team 7 in first, followed by Team 1, then Team 9, all three tied at 50 points. Team 18 sitting fourth at 49. The margin was essentially nothing. Dozens of teams had produced identical results. Ching processed that and realized if they slowed down even slightly, they would get overtaken, which meant they needed to find more zombies immediately. But Liuoshi already knew where the real points were. The hidden rule of this dungeon: the only way to create a decisive point gap was by defeating the zombie king at the center of the forest. If he wanted the highest score, that was his actual target. Jian commented that the feeling of not knowing where zombies would appear next was both tense and exciting. She was doing a convincing job of playing normal. Then a zombie lunged out of nowhere and tackled Ching. He hit the ground with the monster pinning him down. At the same moment the second zombie wave materialized. Liuoshi asked if he could handle it. Ching said yes through gritted teeth. He was not going to be dead weight. He headbutted the zombie square in the face. Liuoshi told him not to move recklessly. Jian said she was too scared to do anything. Liuoshi ignored that entirely and pushed forward while Ching wrestled with the one that had him pinned. Jian's patience cracked. He kept treating her like she wasn't there. She decided to make herself useful in her own way. She quietly activated the god's power and began drawing corrupted players toward their position. Players who had already accepted the evil god's aura and were operating as its agents. Ching was starting to understand these zombies were significantly stronger than he had expected. He refused to go down. Zio was still out there, still waiting. He was not losing here. He grabbed the zombie by the throat and squeezed until it dissolved. He felt unreasonably proud of that. Liuoshi acknowledged it was solid work. His own side was already finished. Ching looked between what he had just barely accomplished and what Liuoshi had dealt with in the same time and felt the comparison land on him like a brick. And someone arrived, slow, deliberate clapping. The man said that clearing zombies at that speed was genuinely impressive. Liuoshi felt it immediately. All three newcomers were carrying the evil god's aura, the same signature as Jian, which meant they had done exactly what she had: helped the evil gods eliminate other players inside dungeons and received the aura in exchange for their continued survival. Miserable math, but people made it. Jian noticed them too, but her reaction was contempt. They didn't have a god directly inhabiting them like she did. In her personal hierarchy, that made them lesser. She had already sent them the hidden rule. She expected the next few seconds to get very violent very fast. She could also feel her god's anticipation building. It was hungry for what was coming. Ching, completely unaware of any of this, suggested they team up and help each other out. The three newcomers found that genuinely funny. Then the hidden rule appeared in everyone's view: killing another team allows you to absorb their points. The man who had been clapping smiled like he had just been handed a gift. Taking points through killing was the fastest route to the top, and that math was simple. He told Ching warmly that teaming up sounded perfect. Ching extended his hand. In the next second, the man had a sword aimed at Ching's throat. Ching registered that he couldn't dodge in time. He braced himself and then a sword cut across and blocked it. The man stared. He hadn't tracked that movement at all. Liuoshi looked at the three of them and asked whether they had actually thought this through. The man wasn't interested in conversation. He told his teammates to finish them. Liuoshi deflected their attacks with smooth, minimal movements, precise enough to be slightly insulting. The man refused to back down. Their points were right there. He wasn't leaving without them. His male teammate opened up with a machine gun. His female teammate began casting spells. They were committing fully. At that exact moment, the blue vein sword skill reached full charge. Liuoshi made his move. He released a single strike. They moved to block it. They were wrong about being able to. The man watched his sword shatter, then his body split in half. All three of them vanished simultaneously. Ching blinked and asked in complete sincerity why they had even tried. Liuoshi explained it simply: points. The man had said it himself. One of the dungeon's hidden rules allowed a team to take another team's accumulated points by eliminating them. He then turned to Jian and asked if that was correct. She performed the expression of someone hearing this for the first time: convincing, if you decided to ignore every other thing she had done. Liuoshi looked at her with no warmth in his eyes and issued the warning plainly: if she put his friend in danger again, he would deal with her first. He had already watched her true colors start to show, and he was done pretending he hadn't. She didn't believe he would actually do it. And she had already spread the hidden rule to more teams. Every player who had accepted the evil god's aura had received it. The real slaughter had begun. She was confident in her read. There was no way he was walking out of this. The system updated. Team 7, Liuoshi, Cheng, Jian, now sitting at 163 points, ranked first. They had absorbed the points from the team they had just eliminated. But first place in a dungeon like this with the hidden rule now active across the entire player field, that was a target painted on their backs, not a safe position. Liuoshi was already tracking it. More players were absorbing the evil god's aura as the chaos spread. Things were going to get significantly worse before they got better. Qing moved in close and murmured that something felt seriously wrong about Jian. He suggested dropping her and moving on without the dead weight. Liuoshi shook his head. It wasn't the right moment. Letting her go now would just release her into the general player population, and she would start tearing through normal players immediately. Too much collateral. Qing accepted that for now. Keep her close, keep her visible. More zombies began closing in from multiple directions. Jing tensed up. Liuoshi told him to keep up if he wanted to get stronger. This was the opportunity he needed to take. They went in together. Qing ran with him. His mind was fixed on one thing: strong enough to save Zio, strong enough to protect the world. Those were the only two goals that mattered. After the wave, Qing was completely gassed. Liuoshi had reached level 17 with 26% experience progress. Jing had reached level 7 with 69%. Liuoshi tossed a handful of attribute cards in his direction. Qing had the levels, but his stats hadn't kept pace. That needed to change. Qing used the cards. The fatigue dropped away instantly. Strength rose to level 3, stamina to level 2, agility to level 1, not a dramatic jump but real, tangible progress. Players have natural affinities for certain attributes. The higher the affinity, the stronger the return on each card invested. Rui's highest affinity was agility, Mao's was strength, and Qing his was stamina. If that affinity was developed properly, Qing had the potential to become one of the most durable shield-type players in the game. The kind of frontline that future dungeons would be built around needing. They pushed deeper into the forest. Jian watched them from behind and began running her own projections. Grinding basic zombies alone wasn't going to produce a dominant point total, not at the rate competitive teams were moving. For anyone serious about top placement, absorbing other teams' points through elimination was eventually unavoidable. This was exactly the kind of chaos her god had been waiting for. The slaughter she had set in motion was just getting started. Meanwhile, Team 1, Zheng Feng, Luoyan, and Feng Dai finished dismantling another team. At this rate, first place was within reach. They were aware Team 7 was sitting right behind them and neither side could afford to coast. Luoyan suggested going after Team 7 directly, take their points and no one would be able to catch up, but Zheng Feng told them to hold, let the fish get a little fatter first. He smiled, more satisfying that way. He was sitting at 23rd on the World Contribution Leaderboard, and he knew how to be patient when patience paid dividends. Meanwhile, Liuoshi cut down an advanced zombie. Qing was already breathing hard. The appearance of advanced zombies meant they were approaching the deepest zone, the miasma dense core of the forest. Qing agreed without needing to be told. The air itself had gotten heavy, like something massive was just around the next bend. The miasma concentration in this zone was on a completely different level. Then Qing felt it, a debuff seeping into his body. He started to panic, but Liuoshi said calmly that the debuff was the least of their problems. Something significantly worse was incoming. He was already expecting the boss. Right on schedule it appeared. The Zombie King level 18, 2 skills, Miasma Domain and Zombie King Poison Gas. Qing went completely still the moment he saw it, then it turned toward them and they got a full look at its face. Corpse-pale skin, hollow features, glowing red eyes, and a twisted skeletal grin that looked like it had been frozen in place for years. Then it charged. Qing, to his credit, did not run. He drove his head straight into the Zombie King's jaw. The impact actually pushed the boss back. Qing stood there for a moment, surprised at himself. Liuoshi clocked it immediately. That stamina affinity, the way it had translated into that headbutt, was abnormal. If Qing developed that into something deliberate and controlled, becoming the strongest shield-type player wasn't a fantasy. It was a realistic ceiling. The Zombie King recovered, roared, and came again. Qing panicked. It was already back up. Liuoshi stepped in and parried the strike with his sword. He told Qing to get clear, this one was his. Qing wasn't built for this fight yet. But the Zombie King didn't slow down. It kept coming, relentless, one exchange after another. Liuoshi blocked each one, but something felt wrong. The creature's body was absorbing his strikes without meaningful damage. Normal slashing wasn't going to work. He needed to find another angle. Then the Zombie King inhaled, deep and deliberate. Liuoshi's eyes sharpened. A skill was incoming. It exhaled and a stream of corrosive green liquid sprayed outward. He sidestepped with a clean step to the right. The liquid hit a nearby tree. Bark dissolved on contact. This wasn't a boss he could overpower through brute force. He needed its actual weak point. While he worked through the problem, he wasn't the only one paying attention. Team 1 was watching from the shadows. Zhang Feng told his team to stay put, let Liuoshi drain himself finishing the boss and then move in, take the rewards, the kill credit and the points, all of it. The zombie king came straight at him again. He thought it through quickly, most creatures' weak points were around the neck. He committed to that read and aimed for it. His blade connected. Nothing, no damage, no reaction worth noting. Wrong call, this one's weak point wasn't where logic said it should be. The zombie king immediately countered, claws cutting toward him. Off to the side, Jian watched with a quiet, satisfied smile. To her, this was obvious. Treat monsters in this game like textbook enemies and you paid for it every time. But Liuoshi stayed composed. With surging wind active, his speed gave him more room than the situation looked like it offered. He trusted that. He shifted angle and slashed across its chest. The monster countered instantly, no damage registered, no hesitation in its movement. He narrowed his eyes, hitting it wasn't producing results, dodging forever wasn't either. Where was the actual opening? Then it clicked. Ching. Earlier, Ching's reckless headbutt had actually staggered the boss, not a blade, direct physical impact. At that exact moment, the zombie king inhaled deeply again. Liuoshi locked onto that movement. That was the tell, that was the window. Ching saw it too and immediately shouted for Liuoshi to get out of the way before the poison came. Liuoshi didn't move, he said it quietly, this next strike would decide it. Then he went straight in. The zombie king stopped mid-movement. It genuinely hadn't processed that someone would charge directly into the setup. The strike landed clean. The monster let out a piercing shriek. Its HP dropped to 72%. Confirmed, now he understood why Ching's headbutt had worked earlier and why blades had done nothing. The inhale was the opening. That was the one moment it was vulnerable to direct force. Jian clenched her jaw watching from behind. He had figured it out far too quickly for her comfort. Then a voice threaded into her mind, her god, whispering. It called Liuoshi interesting, said it wanted to devour him, told her to be patient. When the moment was right, it would descend into her body and take him itself. She agreed quietly and immediately felt the familiar dread underneath that agreement. Every time the god possessed her, she came out of it barely functional, drained, aching, unable to move properly for days, and now she was going to have to endure it again because of Liuoshi. She was furious in the quietest, most controlled way she knew how to be. Zhang Feng, watching from the tree line, had been quietly revising his read on Liuoshi with every exchange. Sharp instincts, ice-cold under pressure, legitimately strong. He started wondering exactly where Liuoshi sat on the world contribution leaderboard, and more importantly, when their paths would actually cross. The zombie king roared, rage fully surfaced now. Liuoshi looked at it the way someone looks at a problem they've already solved. He told it plainly its weak point was exposed. There was no point in dragging this out. And then he hit it again and again. Same spot every time, relentless, precise, never once off target. The boss's health dropped steadily all the way down to 9%. Zombie King stumbled and hit the ground. Liuoshi stepped forward. This was the finishing blow. Then Team 1 burst from the shadows. He caught the movement immediately. They weren't here to help, they were here to steal the kill. Before he could fully react, Zhang Feng drove into him, a full-body collision that knocked him off balance. And in that single opening, the other two members moved in and took the Zombie King's head. Clean, fast, shameless, system notifications. Zombie King defeated by Team 1, 100 points awarded. Liuoshi went still for a beat. Ching immediately lost his composure and started cursing them out. Jian watched from the side with barely concealed excitement. She could already smell what was about to happen next. Liuoshi's eyes settled on one person, Li Zhangfeng. So that was who had been sitting in the shadows this whole time. Zhang Feng raised an eyebrow, clearly amused that Liuoshi recognized him. He even said so, seemed like his name carried some weight after all. Liuoshi didn't cushion it. Yara did, famous for being disgusting. He already knew the full picture, helping the evil gods eliminate players inside dungeons, robbing people of cards and equipment, kidnapping children in the real world for ransom leverage. Zhang Feng didn't deny a word of it. He just smiled wider, then said he was in a bad mood and needed to kill something to settle it. Level 15. Weapon, giant heavy sword, level 6. Strength level 3, stamina and agility both at level 1, far from weak. Beside him, Loyan masked, level 13, weapon, bloodthirsty dagger, level 4, strength and agility both at level 1. And Feng Dai, level 12, steel brass knuckles, level 3, a crew built entirely for close-range elimination. Ching could feel it standing next to them. These three were not pushovers. Even Jian from behind him quietly suggested that walking away might be the smarter move. But Zhang Feng had already decided. He wasn't letting them leave. Killing them and taking their points was the reward he had actually come here for. Then Liuoshi spoke. The Zombie King had dropped something, a weapon card. C-rank shield type, level 10, corpse poison reflector shield, strength +3, stamina +5, agility +1. Skill, corpse poison spray, corrosive effect, 5-minute cooldown, a high-demand, high-value item perfectly suited for a stamina-focused player. Ching felt the sting of that immediately. That should have been theirs. But Liuoshi didn't look shaken. He said simply they would take it back. His eyes briefly landed on Ching when he said it. That shield had Ching's name written all over it. Zhang Feng caught the look. He grinned, so they were actually choosing to fight. 3 people, that was all they were bringing. He mocked them, told them to hurry up and die. Liuoshi didn't dignify that with a response. Talking was done. He moved first. Blood energy surged through the blue vein sword. Skyrending slash stage 2, full charge, strength boosted by 2 levels, everything lined up. He swung, a massive slash tore through the air. Zhang Feng stepped forward to intercept it. His blade collided with the attack and broke it apart. But the moment he did, Liuoshi was already there, right in front of him. The slash had been the distraction. In Liuoshi's mind, this was already over. The next strike was the judgment. And that's where we're leaving it today. If you want the weekly chapter updates for this series, don't miss what happens next. Go check it out and join the update gang. Thanks for watching, stay cool, stay awesome, and I'll catch you in the next one.